Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Starting with invocation by Pastor Tom Nelson, First United Methodist Church. Please rise, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We bow with me. God, thank you for the hearts of those who serve our city. May their investment of time tonight yield the best for the future of Port Orange and its residents. Give wisdom to them to discern what is good, profitable, and just for us all. And for all of us gathered tonight, may there be a spirit of cooperation and a goal of a rich future together. For your people, for our bikers, for your creation and the city of Port Orange, we give you thanks. In Jesus I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Foley?
Here.
Councilman Grubb?
Here.
Councilman Bastian?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stiltner?
Here.
Mayor Burnett?
Here. We have a quorum. We have a full quorum. All are present and accounted for. Which brings us to item 4 on public comments on consent agenda items 6 through 8. Would anyone like to comment on anything that's on the consent agenda tonight? I'm looking Robert's way and he's still sitting there. Okay, we're good. With that, can I get the item 5, approval of the agenda for the evening?
So moved. Second.
We
Go
have a
ahead,
motion,
give
a
it to
proper
Tracy.
second. We'll give it to Mr. Grubbs. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda approval for the evening. Items 6 through 8 on consent. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a proper second. Call the roll.
Councilman Foley?
Yes.
Councilman Grubb?
Yes.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 5-0. Consent agenda is approved. Items 6 through 8. We brings us to public participation. Michelle Utter. Come on up.
How are you doing tonight? My name is Michelle Utter, and I'm going to talk to you because I'm Pfizer vaccine injured. I worked at Advent Health, and they didn't want anyone to know that anyone was injured by the Pfizer vaccine or the COVID-19 vaccine. I have just been terminated after being on disability. I have chronic inflammation, demyelation, polyneuropathy, microclotting, MCAS, cardiac issues, vascular issues, and more. I have been to an infusion center for 35 months. That's a week without being in the hospital, getting infused with IVIG, that's intravenous immunoglobulins, where I sit there for 6 hours and get to think how not safe and effective this vaccine is. We are continuing to have vaccines locally all around. The shots need to stop. I have an autoimmune issue. Without my infusions, I can die. There is no cure for me. Do you want future generations to go through this? I have raised my 3 sons here. They're all serving in the U.S. Navy. I have been an upstanding citizen here, and I've done everything I was supposed to do. I am not misinformation. The government has abandoned us and left us our financial burdens. I have spoken out on Governor DeSantis Roundtable and many others. I have been on many podcasts and radio stations, and I have just recently spoke to Latipo. I need awareness. I need the shots to stop. Also, because of the financial burdens, my infusions cost $15,000 a month just to keep me alive. So if more people have these issues, because there's also cardio issues, neurological issues, there's also issues with sterility, stillbirths, and much more. Are we going to continue this? I will be having rallies. I will be having protests. And I will be y'all's next hurricane. I'm trying to get awareness out, and I will make sure that everyone knows what is going on. I have called here in the past to see if there's anyone that could help me. I was told, no one could help me, and I can give you names of them if you want to find out who I am, or give me a call. I'll be glad to tell you. No newspaper or radio station local will do it. But if you want to go on Governor DeSantis or his website, you'll see me that I'm on there. I'm just tired of being ignored. I'm tired of people not knowing about vaccine injuries. I'm tired of your hospital hiding people. I am tired because I will be the whistleblower. I will have lawsuits, and I do not appreciate being injured by the vaccine. And you continuing it here at all these local pharmacies, because I have video of every single one of them having communication with him. Have a good day.
Thank you. And I have Michael Agri. There he is.
Good evening. Good evening. Michael Agri, I'm Port Orange resident. I'm just here on behalf of the Port Orange South Daytona Chamber of Commerce. I'm this year's board chair. And I just want to thank the mayor, the city councilor, the city manager and the council for all your support. You guys have been very good to us. And I just want you to know on behalf of the board of directors, we appreciate y'all. That's it.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate you not having to take all 3 minutes. Tracy, do I have any others? Okay, thank you. With that, council comments, let's start at this end. Councilman Foley?
Yeah, just one quick thing. During the consent agenda, we approved the local rules change in order to comply with that case, which I think was the right decision to make, obviously. Good job by Matt and his staff and everyone involved in doing that. But that brought up, when me and Matt were discussing it in private, just, going through some of this, it brought up something I had mentioned before, I want to say maybe October, November last year, about the order of our agendas and how we have our things structured. And I was talking about the agenda approval itself, which is item 5 tonight. And I was talking with Matt, I talked with Wayne, and I'm trying to, once again, I know this seems like a small thing, but I think there's some unintentional confusion that occurs about how we have that structured. And on all the boards I serve, I'm on TPO, I'm on the executive committee, fire pension. We're the only one I know that has an agenda approval, where we have it and when we do it. And I know that it's not even a requirement. So I've asked Wayne once again to talk to you guys, whether that's in private or whatever it may be, about how you feel about removing that and just proceeding with a regular agenda. So, you guys can talk to him on your own about it. I just want to let you know that I still think that when I've talked to more than one resident, probably about 10, who find the way we do that small process to be slightly hard to understand. So I think we should always try to be as clear cut and transparent as we possibly can be. And I don't think that there's any need for that item to be in there. If we want to pull something off consent, we can do that when consent comes up. So, but that's my opinion. I'm just sharing it again and letting you guys know that I was talking to Wayne about it again. So.
Okay, I will give you my take on it. It's that, it's part of Robert's rules, a very minuscule part of Robert's rules, which we've adopted as our rules. But more than that, when we adopt the agenda for the evening, we're saying yes to what was posted. I'm not a fan of adding things to the agenda after it's been posted, but that would be the place it would be done, and we would be doing that in a very public fashion. I'm not a fan of bringing things up that are not on the agenda, and sometimes I have seen it in years past where council people have brought the surprise item up at the end of an agenda, and at the end of an evening, and I don't think that's appropriate. But that's part of the reason why we do that. So I think while it might be clear as mud sometimes, there is actually a method to the madness. But that's just my take. But we can all have those conversations with the city manager.
Yeah.
And usually at the beginning of the year, when we adopt and review our rules for the year, if you want to change that then so be it. But we'll take that for what it is.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Tracy, what you got for us tonight?
A couple of things. In December, we talked about these lovely postcards that were coming around for the PACE program. That's an initiative for homeowners to take care of their houses and everything. And as a city, we came out and we pretty much ex-nayed some of these contractors from having the abilities to hornswoggle. I guess was a polite way of putting it. But I just want to let everybody know is they're back. Everybody should have these come out in their mailboxes again. They're nice. It's the same exact information, just rebadged a different way. So just be careful when you're getting these deals and notices in your mailboxes through different programs that they need to be contractors that are licensed for the city of Port Orange so you guys don't get in trouble. They dish out a beautiful sales pitch to you, and it's one closeness to snake oil. So be very, very careful with that. Going on with that, we got Public Works and everybody over the last month and a half. We're getting lots of paving done.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. I want to thank the staff for doing a great job in getting all that done, and concrete repairs are still moving along, other than the rainy days that came out again. But with the rainy days, it's always, I know everybody up here gets cringy when it rains like it did the other days on the weekend. 4 problem areas that I've been watching and observing, out of that, there was only one that had some water standing. Otherwise, everything else was just basic in the gutter and dried up. So, again, thank you to the staff. You guys are staying on top of it. And when you go down Jackson Street and Sugar Forest area that I've been watching really regularly, and seeing that after that strong rain on Sunday and 6 o'clock in the evening and there's nothing standing in the canals, I was happy. That's all there was to it. It was just fantastic. And then lastly is dealing with groundbreaking. I know you're going to talk a little bit about it, so I don't want to take too much thunder away from you.
Which
if
one?
you guys are available on a March 11th,
Oh, the Monday one. There's
Monday?
a Thursday one also.
5:30,
ahead.
Thrive Church is doing groundbreaking, and this is a fantastic event for those that can come out and join in. It'd be great to see everybody there.
I was going to say, and how did all that paving project happen in your district? What's going on with that?
Yeah. Some of it was in mine.
What you got for us this week, Scott?
Just a comment of praise. We've had a couple of really great events the last couple weekends down in the River District at Riverwalk Park, and I just want to compliment the folks that have been putting those events on, and the city staff that supplements that and helps to put on a great event. I know Councilman Grubbs was responsible for the weather this past weekend, and kind of, but he's new and he'll get the hang of it. So.
He didn't consult with the Chamber of Commerce. That was the problem.
But even with tough weather, it was still a successful event, and we'd like to see more events down there because I get really good praise and feedback from the residents that attend the events down there. So good thing to see, and that park is being well used for sure. That's all I got.
Indeed. Drew, what you got this week?
Already been covered.
All right. Wayne, the street lights on Nova Road, that section from Herbert Street on Nova heading south towards Dunlawton, that have been out since Hurricane Ian in 2022. I know we've talked about it in the past. And this is the stuff that drives us crazy because it's in our city. But, the streets that we don't own because some are city streets, some are county streets, some are state roads. Some of the lights, most of them are maintained by FP&L, but they're on DOT right-of-ways. And the government morass, here we are a year and a half later. Can you give it, what's going on with those?
So the latest we had, there was an issue of whether there was power there. So Florida Power and Light went out, checked they believe they have found good power in that area. So they passed that along to the Department of Transportation. So sometime around Christmas, Department of Transportation put a work order out there to go work on it. We don't have an update past that time, so we'll get that from you to see. But they do believe there was power in that area, so that was the last we heard.
If you can get us some kind of timetable. I mean, you've only been on it for a year and a half. It'd be nice to, matter of fact, it would be nice if we had lighting like that up and down Dunlawton, but the places where we do have it, I'd like to be able to take full advantage of it. And if you could stay on that for us, I'd appreciate it. With that, item 10, special reports. Report from Camper Sports on the Cypress Head Golf Course.
Well, I'm going to start by singing a song from Creedence Clearwater Revival. Full Stop the Rain.
Yeah, right.
Just kidding, I'm not going to sing. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Jeff Dayton, General Manager at Cypress Head Golf Club. So, as you know, it hasn't been the best weather for golf, but we're trying to hang in there as best we can. The superintendent's doing a great job, keeping the course looking great. It's been a tough growing season for all superintendents in the area, but we have seemed to weather it better than most. So, happy to report the golf course is in great shape. With a little bit of sunshine, we'll get back into financial condition. But through January, these numbers we're just shy of $700,000 in revenues. We're under budget by about $30,000. We're keeping payroll and operating expenses managed as close knit as possible. And through January, we're under bottom line budget by $20,000. With given 4 straight months of bad weather, that's not too bad. So we feel pretty well positioned to make a solid comeback and get back into the good position with regards to budget. We've played just shy of 15,000 rounds so far, just under budget by about 1,600, and almost 1,000 rounds under last year. So rounds are down. It's not unusual. The whole South Atlantic region for golf, National Golf Foundation just reported that in January alone, rounds were down 18.5%. The average temperature was down 5 degrees. The average precipitation was up 29%, so nothing good for golf. But like I said, the team's performing well under these adverse conditions. I just got back from Chicago, the Kemper Sports Conference, and we received a couple awards: the Par Club Award for hitting budget, which Cypress Head has done 6 years in a row now, and the True Service Award for having a net promoter score of 70 or above, which we were one of the leaders in the company. And our net promoter score actually grew by 20% over prior years. So that's a pretty incredible statistic and a testament to the team that we have there. The conditions for the golf course had an NPS of 92, thanks in large part to Darren Bocci and his team. So very happy that he continues to do the right things. The service standards remain high. We're getting ready to roll out a new True Service platform called True Service 3.0. So it'd be just a little more streamlined True Service training. But Suzanne Snyder has been very integral in being a master facilitator with that program development within the company. So she's a key player there. We've got car path renovations and bunker renovations coming up. We're trying to get the numbers together. We've got our quotes in place, so we're trying to get some car paths done by May or June. Bunkers looking at hopefully September, October. And that'll be like the final piece of the puzzle to really completing that golf experience. As many of you know, we just received top 25 for public courses in Florida through Golf Now, Golf Pass. That's a huge unexpected honor and something that we're going to run with.
Considering some of the names that are on that top 25 that you're on there with.
It's a pretty impressive list. So we don't toot our horn a lot, but it's definitely something to be proud of. And we're going to use it on our marketing going forward. Now that our website is completed, I encourage you to go back to that and check it out. It's more streamlined, updated pictures, more user friendly, and cleaned up quite a bit. Now that that's taken care of, Leslie's going to be focusing really on the pass holder program and a new loyalty program that we're looking to roll out called a Frequent Fairway program to try and really capture the local market and all the new homeowners that are coming to our area. So, for the rest of this quarter, we're just trying to catch up. Hopefully, the bookings are solid for tee times through March. We've actually extended our booking window from 14 days to 30 days. We've also started a new program called Notify. I encourage you, if you're a golfer, to go on Notify and click on that, and you can put in your preferred tee times and dates. And when a tee time comes available, you'll get an email or text notification, so you can really have your tee time on standby if you don't get it the first time you call. Tournament booking pace is very strong. We've got 10 outings, 10 tournaments booked from now through the end of May. So pretty much every Saturday could be spoken for if you wanted to have a tournament every Saturday. But it's strong. The demand for golf is strong, continues to be so. It's just a matter of getting the weather to cooperate a little bit better. But that's all I have.
Questions, council? You getting off
range
fairly
looked
easy.
I'm
do
okay
think
with that.
Here we are
okay with that.
in busy season, and we got all this rain, and you're getting off easy from us. I don't know what that says, but do something about the rain.
Yeah,
bring
haven't been
them in,
good. Daytona 500. I mean, hope we get the rest of bike weekend.
Right.
hey. Appreciate you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, sir.
That brings us to the public hearing portion of our meeting. The public hearing portion of the meeting is now open. Item 11, Hammock Preserve Project. And before I read this in, Penny, I'm going to assume you probably want me to go ahead and open both items so that we can discuss them at the same time for ease and continuity.
Yes, sir.
And I will do that. With that, item 11A. Item 11A is ordinance number 2024-02, which is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, relating to comprehensive planning, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, amending the future land use designation for plus or minus 5.2 acres of parcel, 6201-00-00-0010 from urban medium density residential, which is 4 to 8 units per acre, to commercial, amending the future land use designation for plus or minus 29.9 acres of parcel 6201-00-00-0012 from suburban residential, 0 to 2 units per acre, to urban medium density residential, which is 4 to 8 units per acre, amending the future land use designation for plus or minus 2.5 acres of parcel 6201-00-00-0012 from suburban residential, which is 0 to 2 units per acre, to commercial, with text amendment adding a future land use element to provide density intensity limits for the overall plus or minus 149.2 acre property generally located along the north and south sides of Madeline Avenue, east of Williamson Boulevard. Authorized transmittal to be to required agencies, providing for conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date. Can I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve ordinance number 2024-02.
Second.
We have a motion, proper second. Item 11A is open and on the floor. Item 11B is ordinance number 2024-03. An ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, rezoning property consisting of approximately plus or minus 32.4 acres of parcel 6201-00-00-0012. I should have that number memorized by now. From R-8SF Single Family Residential to PUD Planned Unit Development, and establishing the Hammock Preserve Planned Unit Development, PUD Master Development Agreement, and Conceptual Development Plan for a plus or minus 149.2 acre site, generally located along the north sides of Madeline Avenue, east of Williamson Boulevard, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2024-03.
Second.
We have a motion, proper second. The item ordinance number 2024-03 is also open on the floor for discussion. Wayne, who do we have here to present?
Penelope Cruz, Planning. So the subject property consists of 3 parcels, as the mayor mentioned, located on the north and south sides of Madeline Avenue, east of Williamson Boulevard. As you can see on your location map, the parcels have been labeled parcel 1, 2, and 3 for ease of reference. The subject property is currently undeveloped and used for agricultural operations, open pastures, forested uplands, forested wetlands, several drainage ditches and ponds, and the B19 canal. Parcel 1 was previously approved in 2006 for 552-unit multifamily development named Villa Park. Parcel 2 was previously approved in 2006 for a 37-unit single-family subdivision. The development plans for both of these once proposed developments expired prior to the development commencing. So tonight we are here for 2 applications that are currently under consideration for the proposed site that we will review. With the first item that was opened, the applicant is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment to amend the future land use map to change the future land use designation of approximately 5.2 acres on parcel 1 from urban medium density residential to commercial, and to change the future land use designation of parcel 2 consisting of 32.4 acres from suburban residential to 29.9 acres of urban medium density residential and 2.5 acres of commercial. The current future land use designations on the subject property have been in place for over 25 years. As part of the proposed comprehensive plan amendment, there's also a corresponding future land use text amendment that would limit the development so that all residential units would be clustered onto parcel 1 with a maximum of 873 residential units, and limit the neighborhood commercial uses on parcel 1 and 2 to 40,000 square feet with no more than 10,000 square feet of that allowed to be located on parcel 2. The proposed comprehensive plan amendment does not increase the number of dwelling units allowed on the subject property, but it will increase the square footage of commercial uses by the 40,000 square feet at a designated commercial node. While commercial uses are generally located at an intersection node, according to the applicant, the proposed commercial located on the south side of Madeline Avenue is placed in a location to allow pass-by trips for residents who will stop on their way to and from their homes for traditional neighborhood commercial uses that serve the general area. The surrounding area near the site, including the southwest corner of Williamson Boulevard and Madeline Avenue, where commercial land uses would typically be located, is already developed for residential uses. So by providing the neighborhood commercial uses near this node, the proposed development will provide the potential for shorter vehicle trips for services to existing residents. The proposed future land use amendment is compatible with the surrounding area and generally consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the city's comprehensive plan. The proposed future land use designations meet the locational criteria, as the subject property is located along an arterial corridor near the intersection of two arterial roads. Utility infrastructure already exists in the area, and adequate capacity exists for potable water, sewer, schools, and solid waste to accommodate the proposed amendment. The school district has reviewed and approved the proposed amendment, and if approved, will review any future development plans. As for traffic, roadway segments above current capacity were identified, and as with all development, any future site development proposals for the property will be subject to concurrency regulations requiring adequate public facilities be provided to mitigate the impacts created by any proposed development. With the second item, the applicant is requesting to rezone 32.4 acres from R8 SF single-family residential to planned unit development and establish the Hammock Preserve Master Development Agreement and Conceptual Development Plan for the overall 149.2 acre site. Of that 149.2 acre property, approximately 116.8 acres is already zoned PUD, but without an active master development agreement to establish development parameters. So if approved, the proposed PUD would allow for the development of a mixed-use project that consists of 87 multifamily units clustered on parcel 1 to allow for increased open space preservation of natural areas and drainage on parcels 2 and 3, with no increase in the number of dwelling units allowed on the subject property. As proposed, the multifamily buildings on parcel 1 would be a maximum of 65 feet tall, except for a portion of the multifamily building located within 100 feet of the PUD boundary, which would only be allowed to be 45 feet tall. Also including 40,000 square feet of commercial square footage distributed between parcels 1 and 2, with no more than 10,000 of that square feet being allowed on parcel 2. And just an example of what a 10,000 square foot of commercial would look like, that would be similar to the multi-tenant building on Dunlawton where Chicken Salad Chick is located. So that multi-tenant building is approximately 10,000 square feet, just as an example. As proposed, the commercial buildings will be a maximum of 45 feet in height on parcel 1 and 25 feet in height on parcel 2. The proposed neighborhood commercial uses allowed are listed in the master development agreement and on page 4 of the staff report. Roadway connections for the PUD are proposed at Madeline Avenue and Williamson Boulevard. Driveway stub-outs to the adjacent vacant commercial property at the northeast corner of Madeline and Williamson would be required for a future internal connection between the two commercial properties. And based on the anticipated traffic entering and exiting the proposed PUD, designated left and right turn lanes are anticipated at all driveways into the site. However, the final design of driveways for the PUD would be reviewed and approved through Volusia County through their driveway permitting process, since all the proposed driveways would be on county-maintained arterial roads. The multifamily and neighborhood commercial uses would comply with the city's parking requirements in the Land Development Code. And the roadway network within the PUD would consist of private roads or access drives that the property owner would be required to maintain. The MDA requires the developer to construct an 8-foot wide sidewalk along Williamson Boulevard on the north side of Madeline Avenue, and a 5-foot sidewalk along the south side of Madeline Avenue, along with connections into the development and an internal sidewalk network for parcel 1 to connect all proposed multifamily to the commercial. The PUD would also comply with the city's landscaping and tree preservation requirements in the LDC. And when a site plan would be submitted in the future, a formal review of that landscaping and tree preservation would occur to verify compliance with the code. The proposed dimensional requirements for the PUD are generally consistent with those of conventional zoning districts that allow for the proposed uses that are proposed in the PUD, with the exception of height, which will be discussed a little bit later on in the presentation. The proposed MDA indicates a minimum 60% of the 149.2 acre PUD would be reserved for open space, with 76% equaling approximately 113 acres actually set aside for open space on the concept plan, which is higher than what's the minimum required by code. And of that, a minimum of 20% would be reserved for common open space. The MDA also requires a 20-foot perimeter landscape buffer adjacent to existing residential subdivisions, 50-foot landscape buffer along Williamson Boulevard and along the east side of parcel 3, and a 35-foot landscape buffer along Madeline Avenue, which is also greater than what is required by the Land Development Code. The three parcels, oops, I think I went too far. The three parcels are currently hydraulically connected to the B19 canal and also assist with routing of adjacent stormwater systems that flow through the property to the B19 canal. Currently, stormwater from parcel 1 is retained on site in existing wetlands and ponds, or is conveyed by pipes under Madeline Avenue to an existing pond on parcel 2, or to the Pelican Bay drainage ditch to the north side of parcel 1 and ultimately discharges to the B19 canal. The pond on parcel 2 holds water from parcel 1 and 2, and along the east side of parcel 2 is the B19 canal. However, based on the survey data, there is no direct outfall from parcel 2 to the B19 canal, but during storm events that go beyond the 100-year 24 event, such as Hurricane Ian, there is overland drainage that occurs from parcel 2 into the B19 canal. The B19 canal runs along the west side of parcel 3, along with a series of ditches on parcel 3 that convey stormwater from adjacent subdivisions to the B19 canal. And again, based on the survey data, there is no direct outfall from parcel 3 to the B19 or under Madeline Avenue to parcel 2. However, since parcel 3 is lower than the surrounding developed areas, when the B19 canal overflows, it tops its bank and water stages on parcel 3. So the proposed stormwater drainage infrastructure for the PUD would be provided as depicted on the concept plan. The proposed development spans 3 parcels located within flood zone AE and a designated floodway. Parcel 1 would include a network of ponds, wetlands, existing drainage canals or ditches that will be designed to treat and attenuate runoff, facilitate efficient water management, and mitigate environmental impact. The interconnected ponds on parcel 1 would treat runoff before discharging into a preserved centralized wetland, which you see right over here on the concept plan. The discharge into the wetland will help maintain water quality, contribute to wetland hydration, and in addition, stormwater will also be discharged into the Pelican Bay ditch at the north end of parcel 1, which would eventually outfall into the B19 canal. The concept plan also includes compensating storage ponds on parcels 2 and 3. And according to the project engineer, the compensating storage ponds are strategically positioned to mitigate or offset the effects of the impacts of development on parcel 1 and 2 that require fill to be added within the floodplain. Compensating storage ponds are used to balance the loss of natural flood storage capacity when fill or structures are placed in the floodplain. If the PUD is approved, formal engineered drainage plans are required to be submitted as part of any site or subdivision plan application. In addition to meeting the requirements of the LDC, the stormwater system would also be required to meet the stormwater requirements of the St. Johns River Water Management District, and there could possibly also be permitting required through FEMA. According to the traffic memo provided by the applicant, if the PUD is developed at the maximum density and intensity, it could generate fewer AM and PM peak hour trips, but more daily average trips spread throughout non-peak hours than if the 3 parcels were developed under the maximum residential density allowed by the current future land use designations. The distrib-
I'm sorry, can you read that part again?
Yes, so under the current proposed PUD design, if it was developed at the maximum density and intensity that's allowed, it would generate fewer AM and PM trips, but an increased average daily trips that would be spread out through non-peak hours. And the reduction in those trips in the peak hours is due to the mixture of the types of uses. And so that's what gives you that decrease on the peak hours, but the increase in the daily with the actual development being proposed, but just spread out in non-peak hours.
If you could just star that, because I'm gonna have you come back to that.
Yes,
a little
I'll flag that. The distribution of
I had a
traffic.
feeling.
The distribution of traffic to and from the site is estimated to be split with 37% of the trips utilizing northbound Williamson Boulevard and 18.2% utilizing southbound Williamson Boulevard, and then 44.8% utilizing Madeline Avenue. The staff report included a list of possible future roadway projects that may be needed to ensure adequate transportation facilities are available as part of the development of the proposed PUD. The improvements listed on page 20 of the staff report are subject to change based on analysis results from a full traffic impact analysis at the time development is proposed, or based on the possibility of some of the improvements being already completed, such as the widening of Williamson Boulevard from Madeline Avenue North. Therefore, it's not an official list of the improvements required to be completed as part of the PUD, and this level of data is typically not required or provided at this stage of a land use and zoning, but it was requested and the applicant provided it because we know traffic is a sensitive issue. Also, just to note, in the interim, with the recent repaving of Madeline Avenue, the city was able to restripe a left turn lane onto Clyde Morris Boulevard to increase stacking by approximately 4 cars. And also, as the city council approved at their last meeting, staff has already submitted 2 applications to the TPO to evaluate intersection improvements at Town West Boulevard in Williamson and Clyde Morris Boulevard and Madeline Avenue. The proposed PUD includes 1 requested deviation from the Land Development Code regarding building height. The LDC currently allows a maximum building height of 45 feet for properties zoned with a conventional city multifamily or commercial zoning designation. The MDA includes a maximum building height for multifamily uses at 45 feet within 100 feet of the property boundary, and 65 feet where a building is located farther than 100 feet from the boundary, and a maximum building height of 45 feet for commercial uses at parcel 1. Based on the proposed setbacks in the MDA and the current location of existing single-family homes adjacent to the PUD, no existing single-family home could be closer than over 100 feet from a multifamily building, with the actual separation ranging from 130 feet to 225 feet on parcel 1. According to the applicant, the 1 deviation is requested for the height in order to allow for the clustering of the residential units on parcel 1 in a manner that allows for the preservation of the larger tracts of open space and stormwater areas on parcels 2 and 3. The architectural design for all sides of the multifamily buildings is proposed to focus on functionality, sustainability, natural colors, and architectural embellishments using a modern coastal Florida architectural design. A public notice sign was posted on the site on September the 1st, 2023. And as of yesterday, staff has received phone calls or office visits from 34 people requesting general information regarding the proposed future land use amendment and related rezoning. All of these individuals have been notified of all public hearings. A neighborhood meeting was also held by the applicant on October 2nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Riverside Pavilion and was attended by approximately 65 people. So I know that was a lot of information. So in conclusion, if I were to summarize the bottom line request by the applicant, it would be that they are not increasing the number of residential densities on the residential units on the current property, but what they are asking to do is through the PUD process, cluster those units onto parcel 1. And they are also asking for that so that parcel 2 and 3 can be used as open space and drainage. They're also asking for the 40,000 square feet of commercial with no more than 10,000 of that south of Madeline Avenue. So that's kind of the overall summary. That concludes my presentation, but I know the applicant is here and would also like to provide you with their presentation as well.
Well, Penny, I thought I had a lot to read, but you put me to shame, without a doubt. What I'd like to do is, before we hear from the applicant, are there any technical questions from staff right now? Any technical questions? Because we'll be getting into it with the applicant, the developer representation, a whole lot more in depth with them after their presentation. So are there any technical questions for Penny? And if there aren't now, she's not going anywhere. We can get her. All right. Because the door is going to be locked. You can't leave until we're done. Okay. With that, Mark, come on up. Tell us who you are and what you're asking for, in
All right.
more eloquent words than the technical presentation that staff does so well.
Well, good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Mark Watts. I'm an attorney with the Cobb Cole Law Firm. My address is 231 North Woodland Boulevard, DeLand. And Jessica Gow with our office is also here with me this evening. She's worked quite a bit on this project. We've got a host of folks from Zev Cohen, who are the project engineers, Chris Rowley, White Durant, Bobby Ball. Got a bunch of designers and architects back here with ACI that have done the great imagery here and will be working on the design of the project moving forward. And unfortunately, our transportation engineer with Lassiter was not able to be here. He just had knee replacement surgery and was not cleared to walk and spent a lot of time tap dancing and being on his feet in front of the council meeting tonight. So I'm going to play traffic engineer and answer questions as it relates to traffic as we get through things. But again, we appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening, and we do think we've got something that is a very good addition to the future of Port Orange as you continue to grow and build your city, and also a very smart one. So let me start. Let's see. Scroll down. I know. Yeah, there we go. Let me start with a little bit of history here, and I told the joke at planning board. I wasn't going to tell it tonight, but I thought it was. I can't avoid it. It's just one of those dad joke things, right? So. When I was about 10 or 11, my dad was also a land use attorney, and he and Sam Owens started working together. And I kept hearing him talk about this Cousins family that owned all this property over on the east side of the county, and he was involved with it. And he and Sam worked together on kind of planning what the future of it would be and who was going to own it. And fast forward, whatever it is now, almost 40 years. And here I stand before you representing the same group, the same property, working with the Crossy family, who ultimately, became the owners of the Cousins Holdings, and I think have set a very good history, if you will, set a good example of how to work together as a property owner with the community and the city and the jurisdictions that govern your land, if you will. And that has been something that's, you can kind of see the history of it over time through the community. They worked with the county and the city to establish Williamson Boulevard, dedicate the right-of-way for it, build the initial segments of it. Have worked with the city extensively to plan the entire PCA district, which when I first moved back to this area I had been an assistant county attorney in Pinellas County, which was a county that was largely built out. We were looking at, kind of redevelopment. I think there's still the last 5 or 8 acres that is in unincorporated, Pinellas County that they're planning for. But, it was great to come back to a community and see a landowner in the city and the county working together on something like the PCA, where you planned out where the infrastructure was going to be. You planned out how to develop it over time, including things like Crossy Park and making sure that parkland and everything else was included in the overall plan. And I think in this area, still continuing to plan for things like the extension of Madeline. So we're here tonight really to work with you on planning. We're going to talk about traffic. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but we're also going to talk about the fact that we know that there are hurdles and processes that are to come with regard to how you move from a concept plan and the zoning that's on the property to the execution of it, the construction of new roadways, the improvement of infrastructure and things of that nature. And what we're asking you tonight doesn't do anything to absolve us or remove any of those requirements from us. It simply
helps define as a community, what are we planning for? Are we planning for conventional development pattern that's already there and existing under the existing zoning, or for something different, something that's a little bit, in our view, more thoughtful and sustainable over time? So Penny has gone in a very thorough report and given you a whole lot of information on the actual property, so I won't go into a great deal of detail on this particular slide, but there's the property again. You know the boundaries, and there's 3 parcels that are included in it. Current land use and zoning, one of the things that, you know, we sat down and initially started working on this overall project. It was important to us to, and in our conversations with your staff, it was important to us to look at this as a, you know, from the standpoint of how do we do this better? How do we take the existing entitlements and kind of keep those level, but put a plan together that provides for a better, you know, kind of future and better development approach for the overall property. So, you know, you've got existing PUD zoning, you've got existing single-family zoning, you've got a total of about of the 873 units that are included in our PD. One of the things we've done is look at your policies and added in some of the neighborhood commercial that helps support those uses, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more in the future, and we get to it in a second. But you know, here's your existing, you know, zoning. Here's your existing entitlements that are on the property: suburban residential, urban medium density residential on your land use side, 2 PDs, and the R8S, you know, single family zoning, you know, on the zoning side. What's that look like? So to me, it helped to kind of put this into a graphical representation. So if you look at the property today with the zoning that's in place, everything that's yellow and red is the area that would be developed. The things that are green and blue are the things that would be preserved or set aside as open space, or as some other, you know, stormwater feature and things of that nature. And I'm going to get back to that slide in a second, but I can bring it back up if you need me to. This was a pretty good summary that we thought kind of, you know, put together what are the highlights of, you know, what's the benefit of, you know, going down the road that we're proposing instead of, you know, the existing zoning road. To me, the first one that's a, I don't know, can you see my little cursor up here as well? It's kind of really weak, but this is one of the really, really big ones. Under your code, if you move forward with the development of the overall property in a conventional standpoint, you know, with conventional zoning and the PDs that are in place, you'd probably be around 50 to 55% open space. On the PDs, you've got a 60% threshold, so you'd be a little bit higher in those particular portions of the property. But the plan that we have as part of the PUD this evening has 113 out of the 149 acres in the property set aside in some form of open space. It's about 76% of the site in open space, stormwater, things of that nature. And I'll show that picture in a minute because it's a very different picture. We've increased buffers. We have created, and we have an opportunity to create, a very interconnected and coordinated drainage system with one management entity. We've reduced the connections with this proposal to Madeline with regard to access to the roadways. This would be a development with private roads instead of public roads. Councilman Stiltner, you kind of highlighted this point earlier, but it actually reduces the rush hour traffic, if you will, even though while you have a little bit of an increase in the overall daily traffic over the span of time, and we can talk a little bit more about that in detail on the traffic section, actually even reduces the student generation rate. So, you know, we think, again, it's a responsible way to approach it. And this one summarizes a lot of those same things, so I won't go into that again, but from the standpoint of, where do we go? There you go. What's that look like? So think back to that slide that we had up a minute ago that had all the red and the yellow, and this is what that proposes, you know, this one proposes with regard to the development footprint. The red and the yellow still represents the areas that would be developed, but where you previously had a lot of spread out red on parcel 2, and a lot of spread out red that kind of mimicked what you have with Sunset Cove to the south, you know, along parcel 3 heading up along the B19 canal. That's all converted through this plan to open space and stormwater. That's all converted into areas where we take the density and intensity is already associated with that land, and we concentrate it in the yellow and the red areas that are on primarily parcel 1 with a small amount over here on parcel 2. With that, I'm going to ask Jessica to come up and talk a little bit about the design and some of the other setback issues, and then we'll kind of bounce back and forth a little bit.
Good evening, Jessica Gallo, Cobb Law Firm, 149 South Ridge Road Avenue. I do have 2 preliminary comments. One is that the Port Orange Chamber came to Volusia Days with the Daytona Regional Chamber and had a blast, so it was a great showing by them. I just wanted to mention. And the second is that Mark said he was going to start a joke, and then he did not tell you the punchline. So I will tell you the punchline of his cousin's story, because he got sidetracked. And it was that he heard his dad and Sam Owens talking about this, and the cousin's family, and he said, "Oh, it's great. We have cousins with property." He did not know that it was not his family. So that was his punchline. No problem. Jumping into my portion of the slideshow, we wanted to put this slide together. The architecture team, ACIS, did a fantastic job. We don't have project elevations at this stage, but we tasked them with putting together a vision book, something that the city could use to quantify the caliber and quality of the development that we're moving forward with or proposing to. And so this outlines kind of that modern coastal feel, using the lighter elements, natural building materials, really highlighting the stunning settings of nature, and kind of that feel of having a community where you can walk to some neighborhood commercial, you have that clusters, you have outdoor spaces that you can really enjoy. And so that was the vision board, if you will, of the development. And here are some examples. So soothing color palettes, plenty of textures, visual weights, a lot of glazing, glass elements to kind of highlight those views of the nature on the site. And then this is just one example of we're calling it a concept or an inspirational image of what that neighborhood commercial could look like. So these are proposed elevations there. It would be of this similar style. This next image we put together, this is actually taken, if you look on the left side of the screen, on the little people down there, it's taken from Pelican Bay as a perspective. So that's kind of the shot, because everywhere else is pretty separated by Madeline and other areas. So we put this together with the architecture team to show what that 65-foot building height looks like with the proposed development plan in terms of that impact of view. And so through the neighborhood meeting, discussion with residents, a lot of people talked about the Hawks Mill project, which conveniently is in my backyard. And so I get to talk from a personal perspective on the impact of the setbacks that we're proposing here, that 65 feet, 100 feet away, with all of those natural areas in between, versus Hawks Mill, which is kind of your standard development. I'll say it looks beautiful from my street. They've got great fencing, they've got landscaping, but it is kind of right there on the road. And so the visual impact of that versus what we're proposing here is very different. This next set is part of, one of my favorite things I probably got to do, which is add a drone photographer line to my resume, although I'll never have a different job. Don't tell Mark. This is a location shot of, we went out and we bought a Copcool drone a few years ago for land use projects, and this is the first time I've gotten to use it, and you can tell it's me because that me-moji at the bottom looks just like me, I think. So you can see where we were positioned for the photos that you'll see here in a minute. So we did a few sets of photos that you'll see. The first, and like Penny outlined, is that the typical building setback, the minimum we have is 35 feet. If we're beyond that 35 feet, until you get to 100, our height is limited to 45 feet for buildings. And so we took the drone out, 35 feet in, 45 feet up, to say here's the perspective shot of what the top of that building would see looking at the adjacent residential area with Madeline coming down. So you can see the landscaping there. And that is the existing landscaping, not the planting plan with a larger buffer. This is another shot that's again at that 35-foot setback, 45-foot high, right at the entry road to the adjacent residential, to show that we wanted to make sure that at the top of the building you weren't seeing into people's backyards and you're not seeing what they're doing and what's going on with the natural buffering. We also went back, we popped in 100 feet and went up to 65 feet to show what that looks like looking southwest, and you can see that image here as well, which we just thought were really, really helpful. I did not include the numerous photos I took with the drone of the cows on the site. I did forward those to the client though, just so they had them. This is,
I like the cows. Okay.
I know, we should have included at least one. The neighborhood commercial uses that we're proposing is in the staff report, really well outlined. We've just listed them here with a note that there are some under Lot 1 only that would not be permitted across Madeline. Into that smaller pocket, we thought they were a little larger and weren't necessarily that neighborhood commercial pocket that we're looking at in that smaller piece. So those are Lot 1 only. And with that, we're going to bring up Chris Rowley with Zev Cohen to talk about drainage.
Hey,
How'd you get my favorite part of this?
Yeah. Well, Penny did such a great job. I'm gonna try and keep up with her because that was a very good presentation. But Chris Rowley with Zevcone and Associates, 300 Interchange Boulevard. So big item we want to discuss first is flood zone. So this site is in the flood zone. It is in flood zone AE. It is also a portion of it is in the regulatory floodway. What we are doing for right now is we are performing a flood study. We have hired an outside consultant that works with FEMA, and they are performing a flood study on this site, which will basically look at the entire basin, look at what it does now, what elevations it rises to, using the FEMA flood model, and then also we'll plug in our site to see how it impacts the overall development around us, anything near us, and then of course what our site does within us. What we will do from Zevcone's standpoint to help their report is we calculate the existing storage within the site. So Penny kind of mentioned the compensating storage that's provided. So the existing site basically provides storage from the existing ground up to the FEMA flood elevation. So if you can imagine, let's just say the existing ground's at 25, the FEMA flood elevation's at 30. So that 5 feet of storage is the storage that is provided on site whenever a flood event happens. So we have to compensate for that. So we have to calculate that 5 feet times whatever acreage that is and make sure that our compensating storage ponds has at least equal volume, if not more. We are not allowed to increase the flood elevations within the FEMA flood maps based on the flood model that happens. So when they complete the study, they will say, okay, here's the previous flood elevation and here's the final flood elevation. That cannot be increased, not even by an inch. And FEMA will review that, the city will review that, and Volusia County will review that. So we'll have 3 reviews of that. Everybody will look at it and make sure that it, passes the test.
Explain what that means.
Explain
what that means.
The elevation, or so basically they're going to model the 100-year storm event, and they'll see what level the water reaches with that, and that is the flood elevation typically. So in this case, it is 27.5 for most of it. So they've determined the flood elevation at the 100-year storm is 27.5. They will model that in pre-development to make sure it is at that, to verify it, and then we'll plug in our site and our proposed development with our compensating storage ponds and to confirm that the level within the B19 canal does not go above 27.5. So it'll be at 27.5 or below.
So then you can't elevate the properties.
We cannot elevate the flood elevation.
Okay.
So we
But you
cannot
can elevate the property.
We can elevate the property, yes.
Okay.
So we are filling in the storage that's on property, but we are digging holes to compensate for that storage loss, basically.
So in Penny's presentation, because I'll go ahead and ask you to touch on it when you get to the point. I didn't mean to
Sure.
interrupt you, I'm sorry. But
You're fine.
When in Penny's presentation, she talked about current conditions now when the B19 overflows.
Yes.
It overflows onto parcel 1.
It overflows to all of them, and I'm going to get
Yeah,
into that.
if you could just,
Yep.
okay.
Sure.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
So existing conditions. That was actually my next point. So
Of course it was.
during a normal rain event, this is a normal rain event for existing conditions. Parcel 1, it flows north to the Pelican Bay Canal and is interconnected with their overall system, which is connected by weirs to the B19 canal. That's parcel 1. Parcel 2 flows to on-site wetlands and to the on-site borrow pit and stormwater pond that's there. And then if the stage is high enough, it will overflow to the B19 canal as well. Parcel 3 flows to on-site wetlands and ditches, and then again, if the level gets high enough, it will stage up into the B19 canal. So what happens during a flooding event is Spruce Creek rises up, and then it backs up the B19 canal. All of that flow comes up the B19 canal. When it rains, it's got nowhere to go. Then it comes over the B19 canal and into the existing wetlands, into that existing borrow pit, into the existing low-lying areas on our site. So, and the Pelican Bay Canal. So just to further that, when it goes into the north of Madeline, it goes over the weirs into the Pelican Bay drainage system and then overflows into parcel 1. Parcel 2, it just overflows the B19 canal and then drains into parcel 2. And then parcel 3, it overflows B19 canal, drains into the wetlands and on-site ditches there. In proposed conditions, so what we're going to do, in parcel 1 is going to have no compensating storage on it. It's going to have its own stormwater system though. So we will model the 100-year event to make sure that we do not increase the rate of discharge. So basically what that is for attenuation, we will model the rate that leaves the site of stormwater, and we are not allowed to increase that as well as the peak stage. Within parcel 2, that will have a small stormwater system to serve the commercial and the amenity that's put there. and then it'll have a large compensating storage pond that'll serve as that extra storage for the flood events. And then parcel 3 will be strictly compensating storage. So when that B19 canal overflows, it'll have more storage to flow into. During the flood event, as B19 overflows, so it's going to come up the B19 canal, and then it's going to overflow again into parcel 2, will be where it overflows first. We have that large pond now right along the bank. That will basically compensate for all of the impacts on parcel 2. And then when it comes under Madeline, it'll overflow to parcel 3, which will compensate for all of the impacts to parcel 1. And initial calculations, so we performed initial calculations on this. We haven't performed the full flood study yet, but initial calculations of cup for cup is what we call it. We find out, let's just say, actually, I have the numbers. So this one was 142 acre feet of storage. That's how much storage of compensating, that's how much flood storage is provided existing, 142 acre feet. Our proposed compensating storage ponds provide around 162 acre feet. So we're about 20 acre feet above what's required. That's initial calculations. We still need to verify that as we get in, but that's, after we perform the flood study, we'll be able to nail that down. But that's where we're at right now, is we hope to make the overall flood basin better in addition to compensating for what we impact. And I'll pass it to Mark to go over traffic now, and I'll be back for questions.
Yes, you will.
Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna kind of play the traffic engineer here and give you a little bit of a summary of what we've done, because, as I think you heard with regard to Chris's presentation just now on traffic, or on stormwater, we're giving you a lot more information at the zoning stage than we typically would. And that's been something that, based on the conversations we've had with your staff through the course of the past year as we've been working on this plan and getting it here, we've been given some very good advice to make sure that we're focused on resolving some of these issues, and how, the development of the property in the manner that we're proposing, includes some additional benefits, for some of the issues that we know are the hot button issues with regard to stormwater and things like traffic. So one of the other things that we've done is we've gone a lot further than we typically would at this stage, with regard to our traffic review and our traffic analysis. And this is one of the exhibits that was created based on that additional analysis that's been performed at this point in time. And I'll tell you from the beginning, this is very likely to change. What staff asked us to do was say, okay, if you took the existing road conditions today and you put all of this traffic on the road with this project being built out, and you continued to grow the background rate of increase in traffic at the same time, what are the intersections and segments and other things that you would need to look at fixing in order to kind of, keep traffic flowing or improve the flow of traffic through the overall network? And so this was a preliminary list. Lassiter, did the analysis, went through and looked at, the existing, road conditions, the growth in the area, adding in the additional trips from this, and said, here's the things that you may need to either fix or contribute to additional projects that would fix either intersections or segments. And we've got 11 or 13 different, projects that came up here as part of that list. I think as staff has already presented, a couple of those are in your list that you've already gone to the TPO with regard to trying to provide some funding on that. So this is likely to be a dynamic list for a period of time, and that's really how it's intended to be. The way that this property develops, if we move forward with the zoning this evening, you don't have 873 units that come in at a single point in time. You have probably a 5 to 10 year build out over time of different phases of that then get up to your maximum numbers established in your PD, and you add in the commercial and things of that nature. So while that's happening, the city or the county or others may do some of these additional projects. We may have other things that join the list that we focus on, and we move forward and partner with the city and the county to make sure are funded or constructed. But this is that kind of preliminary look. In addition, that study kind of gave us right around the site what are the likely improvements that would be needed. So we've got things like the intersection improvements for Madeline, the widening of Madeline coming through all the way to Williamson, additional turn lanes and through lanes on Williamson at the intersection, and even the potential for a signal, because if you recall our site plan and the way that we've got our traffic, there is an additional kind of road, private road, that comes along here and intersects with Williamson. So that may be a path that diverts some of that traffic directly onto Williamson and may justify a light at some point in time. The other thing that we were asked to do is really kind of look at where the traffic, kind of, again, conceptual at this point in time, but where the traffic goes. And so this is kind of that distribution. We talked about there being, the access points onto Madeline, the access points onto Williamson. So we show and these are all looking at the peak hour, AM and PM peak hour, but about 37% of the trips go north, about 18% go south on Williamson. And then, in this section, because you've got some coming to that intersection, there's about 55% that come on to Madeline and go to Williamson, and then about 44.8% that go on to Madeline and then go to Clyde Morris. So that's preliminary. Now, this isn't the only time we'll be looking at traffic. As I mentioned, we've done a lot more in the zoning stage than we typically would. We will essentially have to go back and redo all of it. And do it in partnership with the county as well, because the county and the city work together to make sure that we're kind of looking at everything that each of the jurisdictions want to do with regard to road improvements in the area. And we know, for example, Williamson is funded, the 4-laning from Madeline north to Bevel. We're already in conversation with the county for things like co-location of stormwater ponds and things where we can create partnerships and help make sure that infrastructure continues to be built. We've had conversations with them about additional things that may join that list as we move forward with, the future development of this property.
Let me just throw in right here, because the county's plan is to expand Williamson to 4 lanes from Madeline to Bevel Road. So those conversations, they will need stormwater runoff to do that.
That's correct. And the great thing is and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling around here, that is a funded project now. So,
Yes,
and it's in design.
Thank you, Amazon.
And it is in design, and that's one of the things that the county's already reached out and is working with us and our clients, both the Crossy family properties and others, to look at, those stormwater sites. And the interesting thing about that opportunity is also, where are the connection points going to be? Because one of the things that, I think as a council sitting up here, you hate to see is you go through and do a big road project, and then you got something that comes in next to it, and they come back and they tear up again what you just did, and they then, kind of build something else in it or add an additional turn lane. So one of the things that the county likes to do and the city likes to do is, if they know what the plans are, if they know where our driveway connections are going to be, things of that nature, then we can work together so that those turn lanes can go in at the beginning of the project, and we don't have to come back and then tear up the road that they just built and put a turn lane into it. I had another point, and I'll close on this one and open up for any questions. But when we were planning board, when we were presenting this to planning board last month, I guess now 2 months ago, 5 weeks ago, January. One of the things that just really stood out to me, and we highlighted it earlier on, but it's the red and the yellow versus the green and the blue, right? The amount of green and blue in the project here, the amount of open space, again, 76% of the overall site. But if you think about some of the parcels and the way that it's clustered, on parcel 1, I think we calculated earlier today, I think our overall open space on the property that we would put all of the density on, and the majority of the commercial development, we're still at 52% open space on that parcel. Parcel 2, down next to Town Park, 92%. So you've got a parcel right now that would have really mostly single-family residential development under the existing zoning, instead being 92% open space. And parcel 3, 100%. 100% open space on a parcel that under, kind of the existing zoning would be so much substantially less. Again, going back to that other exhibit, the red and the yellow are what's developed under the current zoning. I've got a couple of things that I'd wrap up with, kind of at the end of comments, and once we hear if there's anything we need to answer, any other questions that come from the citizens. We've had a lot of success with citizen engagement through this process. We had a great meeting back in October. We actually even had another meeting 2 weeks ago with the adjacent HOAs. We went out to their neighborhood meeting or their annual meeting and presented and answered some of their questions. So, I appreciate everybody's time and energy and effort in your staff, first and foremost, and your time and energy tonight. So we're here for any questions you might have, and if I can reserve a few minutes to come back up and respond to any other questions that may come from the community.
I think that that's more than reasonable. I think at this point, we're going to go round robin with us, and we're going to grill all you guys.
Okay.
Then we are definitely going to hear from the public, and then after we hear from the public, you're going to get grilled yet again.
Sounds good.
But since we have all that forthcoming, what I want council to do is, we've just been fed with a fire hose. So I want us to consider what we have what we've just absorbed, and let's do that over a recess of 7 minutes in length. As of right now, we are in recess for 7 minutes. So 6 minutes and 59 seconds. You're under the And we are back. At this point, we've had a extensive presentation from both staff and from the developer and from on many different segments of the project, whether it be traffic or whether it be stormwater management or design and layout of the project itself. We're going to begin with the inquisitive nature this council I should say awfully has, certainly has when it comes to things like this. We haven't had many things like this recently, and we do know that since we don't own the property and somebody else does, it's not a question of if something gets built there, it's a matter of what and when and how. So, Mark, if you'll forgive me,
Sure.
if we seem to be pressing for answers, I do appreciate one approach, and we've had this happen historically in the past. You probably haven't seen this as much, gentlemen, because you haven't been here as long as us, but there are many times a developer will come before us and say, we haven't got that part yet because we're not required to yet, and you're ahead of the game, and that's very helpful for us because the last thing we want to do is fly blind. So with that, Councilman Bastian, why don't you start?
All right, I want to start with Zevcone.
Chris, you're on.
So, Chris, I'm sorry I forgot your name.
It's okay.
So you explained about the current acre feet
Yes,
of flood control or
Storage, yep.
storage.
Yep.
And so, can you explain how, and unless I'm missing something here, currently 140 acre feet now, and you're proposing, I think you said 162 or
Right,
166. So how does that happen? Can you explain to
Yes,
me and
yep.
everybody? Because you're going to create impervious space, about 25% roughly, and
Right.
70, I'm just rounding, 75% is going to be open. So how do you increase the acre feet capacity when you're making some of that property impervious?
Sure. So, so 140 acre feet, if you imagine, so 140 acres a foot deep is
Okay.
one way you could look at it.
I got
But in this scenario, the site actually is 149 acres, so it is about that. But how we increase storage is we go deeper. So those ponds will be basically the existing ground. You have storage until you hit the water table.
Yeah.
So the existing ponds or the existing ground out there right now is let's say elevation 25, but the water table is at 23. So we got an extra 3 feet of storage there. So
Gotcha.
we divide that 140 by another 3 feet. By digging it, we go down further. So
Okay.
our storage is now lower instead of horizontally, we go vertical.
Okay.
All right.
And reading the material, it's all going to be one drainage system instead of, it's not going to be going willy-nilly everywhere. It's going to be more directed towards that B19 canal and across or under Williamson.
Yeah. So the ones on parcel 2, there's no pipe connection there.
Yeah.
But it is connected over by overland flow, so we'll maintain that
Okay.
basically. So as it overflows, it'll go right into that.
So that's how that water will get
right.
off the property.
Right, but
Okay.
then with parcel 3, that one's connected through wetlands, then which discharges to the adjacent ditches, which the other residential flows through. So we'll basically maintain that existing drainage patterns.
Okay.
So that's the goal with all stormwater systems. We have to, wherever it discharges to now, we have to maintain that.
Yeah.
So.
And I do like so it's not all bad. I do like in this proposal where parcel 3, there's going to be no construction on it.
Correct. Yep.
It will be storage
Right.
basically for the water. So, okay, that was the one thing I just wasn't following how you
Sure.
get, but you're going much deeper.
Right.
And it's going to be more, a lot of it's going to be on 3.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
What else you got, Drew?
The only other one I had, my concern with this is the traffic on Williamson. You and I touched on this back there. The big, the 4-laning to the north will help.
Right.
But then we're going to have that stretch between there and the I-95 overpass
Mhm.
that isn't 4-laned. And my concern is that choke point of the I-95
Sure.
overpass into the future. So that hasn't really been addressed, but I don't think at this particular time it's probably valid to address it, but it's a major concern that as that road and that area becomes more crowded,
Mhm.
that's only gonna get worse and only gonna be more expensive to correct.
Correct, and I said it, kind of the outset when we started talking about traffic.
Yeah.
We've done more than you would typically have at this point in time.
Agreed.
But we don't know all the answers yet,
Yeah.
and the answers we have today may change as we go forward because other things may get funded. So, what I can tell you is, ultimately, when we take the next steps in your process. So I said in the beginning, we're not here seeking to avoid the responsibility that comes after this step. In fact, we're looking forward to working through that next piece of it. One of the things that you'll see again, with your process, we've got zoning, which is the step we're at now, and we come back into the either subdivision review or site plan process, and ultimately, construction requires a development order before we can go out and actually start turning dirt. Right. A development order can't be issued until we've gone through all of that traffic analysis for the development proposal that's moving forward, and either constructed specific improvements that the city and the county and all the agencies agree that need to be constructed, or contribute to the construction of other improvements, or both.
Yeah.
And so things like the design and construction of Williamson 4-laning going down to Willow Run, for example. Those are some of the things that could be in the mix of items that we end up talking with the city and the county about as we move forward with that. Yorktown, and the extension being completed ultimately is another thing that improves the connections without going over the choke point of the bridge. The bridge is going to take federal money or state money ultimately because of the numbers there. But there's a whole lot of things that we can do, and I think part of the analysis, there's signal timing, there's intersection improvements that can significantly improve things while we're waiting for money to come from Washington or Tallahassee for the bridge reconstruction. And that package of things comes back to you in the prop share process so that you see that before we get our development order. You get to look at that as a council, make sure that you're satisfied with it, that we're satisfying your requirements and mitigating for those traffic concerns. So again, we're ahead of where we typically would be, but there's more to come, and you'll see it again before a green light gets turned on for any development.
In regards to the overpass,
Yes.
make sure that it's on everybody's radar as you.
Certainly.
I just want to. I mean, I can't stress that enough.
For
that-
many reasons.
Yeah, that's the problem of the whole thing.
Absolute valid point. We had a project over on the west side of the county that got approved a few weeks ago, and in the very beginning of that project, there was a roundabout that wasn't funded, and nobody had the money to pay for it, and we got state and federal funding that came in the intervening couple of years, and it's starting construction this month.
Beautiful.
So, coordination is, I think, one of the keys of this whole process.
Okay.
You good for now?
Yes, sir.
For now? Scott?
Penny, I actually had some questions for Penny if you wanted to come back up.
Sure she does.
Sure she does. Did you earmark that section?
I also told Tim to earmark it.
What'd you say?
I said I also told Tim to earmark it.
Nice. Kind of go back through that section of your report for me again.
Okay.
You went through so much information. It's,
Do you want me to pull the slide back up for you?
yeah,
Tim?
please.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me just get to
that'd
where
be nice.
that is so we can have it. I think it was this one that we were talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. So so this one we were talking about just the distribution, about the split north and south on Williamson and the split on Madeline, and how because of the mixture of uses, the multifamily and the commercial, and how that creates some internal capture and pass-by trips, that it's actually going to end up decreasing the peak hour traffic. But because of the actual construction and increase in commercial, you do have an increase in overall daily trips, but those trips are spread out during non-peak hours because of the type of uses that are proposed.
And who comes up with those numbers?
ITE, and the traffic engineers.
That will help, because I think this is going to be an important conversation. So cities use, developers use, we all use the Institute of Transportation Engineers documents for statistical analysis of traffic and for modeling. We have to use them because you want to be consistent. You want to have some form of math so you're not making emotional decisions, but you're making decisions off of some form of statistical analysis. So they go out and study these uses 20, 30 different places and come back and run, and I haven't had a statistics class for 30-something years since I was in college, but regression analysis that allows you to say if you have 50,000 square feet of this, you'll get about this many cars. So the generation of cars, whether it's from a single-family house or an apartment unit or a retail store, is a fairly standard number that's well mathematically lined out. We have been using them. Cities use them. That's how we plan in our comprehensive plans. That's how we all use it. It's not just developers doing it to make projects work. It's governments as well, so that we're all on the same page and we're consistent. So your TPOs are doing it. And so the total trip generation is a fairly standard mathematical equation. If you have 873 single-family houses, this is how many cars you're going to get statistically in an average 24-hour period or a peak hour. If you switch it to apartments, statistically it is less number of cars because you typically have less persons per household, again a statistic, per unit than you do in a single family, and they have less trips because they typically have different ages, so you're not having as many children. And so that's where you see the difference in your peak hour trips, because the apartments are lowering the numbers. So the net increase in traffic they're basically just, the number of residential units stays the same on this project. So what's different here is the type of unit. So they're all apartments now as opposed to a mixture of single family and multifamily. And then you're adding the 40,000 square feet of commercial uses. And then based on those uses, there's not a lot of AM trips. So you're not seeing a whole ton of like Dunkin' Donuts or something that would draw a bunch of people in there in the morning, and some of that would be the pass by. So your net difference in traffic over what they could do if they just built with what they've got now and what they're proposing to do is really the reduction due to it being multifamily and then the increase due to the commercial components. And so that's where they ended up with in the rush hours, in the morning at 8 and in the evenings at 5, and it's a little broader than that. You have fewer cars coming from what's being proposed than you would if they just built it the way it is. But throughout the course of the day, more people are likely to go there. So it's really just a statistical analysis of what is common for that type of use. And that's an international database that's done by traffic engineers all over the world.
So then what we're saying is compared to the current zoning, 800 and however many homes, what was it, 8?
It's the same number of units,
Okay,
873,
so
873. It's just a different type.
Compared to that, by going to a higher density in a smaller place with the same residential units,
But different type, right?
Right,
So
different
single
type.
family versus multifamily.
right, different type, and then adding 40,000 square feet of commercial, we're projecting that is less traffic trips during the peak hour, but could be overall more traffic trips
Would
throughout
be.
the course of the day. Definitively.
Correct.
Okay.
Just like what Wayne said. So the change in the type of use from
Right.
single family to multifamily brings the peak down. The addition of the commercial brings the overall daily up.
And to
But at
some
off-peak time.
degree, there's a little bit of you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, I'm not picking businesses just for an example, because I think if you live in Port Orange, we see this, right? If you put a Chick-fil-A and a Wawa there, compared to a Burger King and a Circle K, it's night and day in trips and busyness and all that kind of stuff, right? So you don't know. And 40,000 square feet.
That's
I was trying to
So that's like, if you were to look at the 40,000,
Yeah.
that's like, you know where the Panera Bread is?
Oh yeah.
It's like 2 of those buildings.
Right.
And then the 10,000, if you pull out the 10,000, that's like the multifamily where the chicken salad chick, just as a comparison that everybody's familiar with.
Okay. All right.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, like Walmart neighborhood market is about 38 to 40,000 square feet. So that would be the total of it on the 2 parcels. Okay.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
You're welcome.
Let's see here. You know, some of them, there aren't really questions as much as they are just concerns, and I guess I'll just note those, and then if you want to comment on Mark, you're welcome to. Project scope. Just looking at some and pulling up some rough numbers. If you take all of the 3 largest subdivisions that surround this property, excluding Pelican Bay, because that's not ours, but Town Park, Sunset Cove, and the Groves, That's 680 residential units. Doesn't even come close to what we're talking about, putting a really, really small area on this property and then adding the 40,000. And I'm trying to wrap my head around what's that going to look like, you know, because and I appreciate what the city manager was talking about, and there's agencies and organizations, they provide these numbers, and these numbers are the foundation to go by. But from a resident perspective, there's a little bit of an eye test. There's a little bit of a we live here, we know, we feel, we see already. We're overly concerned already, and you know, I look at the project and I give you guys a tremendous amount of credit because I see a lot of things in the project that make a lot of fundamental sense. I love the fact of taking a lot of the project parcels off of parcel 1, homes off parcel 1, and moving them away from those folks who live in the groves and already back up to the B19 canal and already have those issues. I like the part of taking the project and pushing it away from Town Park.
Right.
You know, I like that stuff. I see the benefit in creating more open space, even that means we've got to go vertical.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing for Florida residents to get used to, because that's, if you've lived here for the last 30, 40, 50 years, that's not really what we've seen in Florida. And I get times change, trends change, development changes, concepts change, and all that stuff. It's just, it's wrestling with that in the mind, and then trying to anticipate, you know, what are going to be the hurdles that we don't see? What don't we know? You're always trying to outthink what you don't know.
Sure.
But what we do know is we already have a tremendous amount of traffic concerns.
Right.
We already have a tremendous amount of concerns over stormwater. I know it's funny, and this is not any knock on any of you guys, but every time I hear somebody mention the 100-year storm, I'm like, God, I feel like I'm 54 years old and I've been through 6 of them, you know? And for those that don't know, what a 100-year storm really truly means is not that the storm's going to happen every 100 years. It means you have a 1% chance every year that it's going to happen, right? So, and I hear from a ton of residents, you know, concerns over vertical, you know, something being so high, 65 feet. There's nothing like that anywhere in that particular region or corridor of the city. There's a lot of other growth and development that's projected and planned that's outside of our scope in Daytona, right? And
and that's the great balancing act, because if you don't go up high, you go out, and then what's that? You have some more sprawl.
Right. And I know it's trying to pick what is going to fit best, because something is going to be here. There will be development. I understand all of that. So some of that is just wrestling with the mind, trying to figure that out. And of course, the commercial part of it, that concerns me a lot, because 40,000 square feet is a lot of commercial, and we don't know what it's going to be. And so when we look at projected traffic numbers, depending on what goes in there, you know, if it's mostly medical offices and stuff like that, there's not huge traffic rushes in the morning. But there could be businesses like the list you guys put up. When you look at that business and you try to envision what you see in East Volusia County now, a few of these and a few of that, and now all of a sudden you've got a lot of demand early in the morning type of a thing, or trips throughout the day. And so anyway, more concerns at this point than specific questions. Just want to, you know, mention what I was talking about. I appreciate you helping us break down the B19 part of it, because that's a critical part of the infrastructure. You know, we feel in Port Orange that everything already flows south. So whatever's happening in Daytona and those projects is coming to Port Orange some way, somehow, because it's got to go out Ponce Inlet eventually, right? And so you can retain so much until it overflows, and then retaining it doesn't exist anymore, because now it's set free, and then whatever the topography of the land is takes
we
control.
already have a lot of water that flows at us from Daytona, because they have no outfall.
Those are just comments for now. You can.
Here's what I want to do. I want, when you say concerns or whatever and allow them to comment, usually what I normally do is like go through everybody and let you comment at the end. I'd rather do it right now as we go. To keep the flow going, so we don't miss anything. So if you want to comment right now, briefly.
I can. So let me do 2 things.
Briefly.
One, to the point of, you know, this is a little bit different than what you have anywhere else in the area, and this is a little bit different. One of the things that when we were going through the comp plan and looking at your policies and how you've planned in your long-term planning to deal with growth and things of that nature, when you did your last comp plan, you said there's 80% of the city is already built out, and the remaining 20% we ought to approach differently. And one of the specific policies that you adopted was policy 4.1.3, which said to help meet its goals for sustainable development, the city will encourage developers to pursue creative alternatives to conventional suburban development patterns, including innovative housing designs, clustering and conservation subdivision design, well-connected gridded street networks, context-sensitive street configurations, alternative pavement types, and compact mixed-use development. You have said in your planning documents, do things differently with the remaining property that's here. And I think that's it's a transition. We're dealing with downtown DeLand, about 6 blocks from my house. We've got the first large, apartment style building going up in downtown in the 40 years since we said that was our primary goal as a community, to build that in downtown. People love it, people hate it. It's all over the place. It's changing what that feels like, and it really feels good because we're bringing into an area of downtown there more people to support the businesses there that will again help that thrive. That kind of transitions and connects to the traffic comment that you made, and I appreciate Wayne's extraordinarily accurate description of how the process works with the IT and everything else, and Penny's information. To me, I just want to give you a real simple example of what it means to have that mixed use and what the effect is. So, different housing types, right? Average house creates 10 trips a day. Average apartment creates 6. So, by reducing those numbers, you're reducing the amount of traffic being generated from the project to begin with. But you've got the commercial. The reason when Penny made the statement and our traffic numbers show that the peak hour trips go down, but the average daily trips go up. So let me give you the simple example that came to mind for me. When I get up, you leave your house, you're going to go to work, but you have to stop and get coffee on the way, or you have to stop and drop your dry cleaning off. When you do mixed use, that first trip doesn't leave the site. And so that rush hour trip stays on site, because I just go downstairs and I drop my dry cleaning off, or I go around the corner, I walk to get coffee, and I leave a little bit later because I don't now have to do that on the way to work. So that's the purpose of mixed use. You're capturing that, and you're not having that traffic leave during that peak hour. Now, you've got something like a restaurant. Maybe you're going to have lunch people that come there now, and so that's why your ADT goes up, but your peak hours go down. That was the simple answer that came to, or simple example that came to mind for me. You're changing that pattern of behavior, if you will.
Can shorten some trips.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially.
Yes.
Again, Jessica Gallicock, Law Firm. There were just a few other tiny things I wanted to say in response to kind of the concerns raised.
Briefly.
Yes, very brief. I'm fast. For trip generation, in terms of that scope of uses, what the traffic engineers, I just want to point out, they've got that whole scope, and they don't know what could be developed yet, like you said. So they picked the
worst,
highest generator out of that whole list. They say that they picked the Chick-fil-A, right, restaurant with the drive-through is probably the highest. Or shopping center if it was larger. And they say, we assume that all 40,000 square feet is going to be this highest potential generator. So that they're looking at the worst case so that it could be under that. I just want to point that out. On the height and then transition, again, I just want to point out the visual impact based on distance compared to just height alone. And so when we have those drone footage and we were talking with the architects, the shot that we provided that shows kind of that surrounding area, that's Santa Claus's perspective on the roof. And so when you look at actual where the units would lay, the balconies would be shorter in terms of view out. But in terms of view in, we have that perspective shot that shows if you're standing here, if you're 30 feet away, it's a presence, right? But if you're 120 feet away on average, it looks much less impactful. And so that's what we've been aiming for the development. And my last one is just on the local traffic. I drive down Madeline every single day. 2 ways, either out to DeLand or down to Daytona. And so I drive that all the time. And the simple fix of adding the striping when they repave Madeline has changed my day to day. It is amazing. And so that's, one of those small traffic improvements that just has a huge impact on how traffic flows through there.
Could you address, didn't you prohibit drive-throughs on all the commercial uses?
We did.
So
That
that's
was
going to
just-
wipe out your Chick-fil-A's
Yeah.
and your major trip
I'm not against
generators right
Chick-fil-A.
there.
Hang on a second.
Better be careful.
For the record,
For the record, what am I saying? That's
they
right.
put,
just
they
a
do
busy
really
place.
well.
It's a busy
They do
place.
really well.
No, that is definitely true.
I'll be getting emails.
Thank you.
What do you got against Chick-fil-A?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing at all. It's
Right.
good where it is. What else you got?
That's it for right now.
Okay. Tracy, what you got for us?
So first we gotta go to Chris. I got a question for you. I know you've touched on the B19. When you go to parcel 3, that elongated parcel, those are individual lakes that are overflowed to B19, or are they part of B19?
So they'll be hydraulically connected to B19.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for the breaks is that's the existing drainage patterns that flow through. We're not going to impede on those and make sure they continue to flow that way.
Okay. Yeah, it's a deep concern. I mean, my community backs up to the backside of Sunset and Town Park, and when Ian went through, and we've been there for 29 years now, and we've never had water in the gutters and 4 feet going across the Sunset Cove Bridge. It's a greatly a big concern,
Yeah,
seeing
of course.
B19 now do what it did.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just want to see how that hydrology was going to work for that.
Yeah, and it's great that they'll be basically right next to the B19, because if you imagine when parcel 1 is used for compensating storage, it has to flood into Pelican Bay. Pelican Bay stages up and then flows to parcel 1, whereas this is going to be right there. Boom.
Correct.
Over top, it's going to be the storage is going to be right next to it.
Okay.
Is that dry storage?
It'll be a combination of dry or wet.
Okay.
Depending on what. Basically, if we need it for fill, we might dig some down deeper to get some fill out of it, or it could just be scraped down and be nice, like a dry storage.
Okay.
So now we're going to go to parcel 2.
Okay.
Parcel 2, that backs up to the backside of Town Park. I've talked to some residents of Town Park, and that section has always been a low-lying area.
Mhm.
Town Park gets that section muddy all the way,
Sure.
all the time. And I know it well because I ride my mountain bike through there all the time and bury up. It's not a fun thing.
Mhm.
So I already know it's wet back there. You guys are taking and digging that and existing into the already lake that's there.
Yes.
So how do you guarantee the elevation of being evened out so it's not going to, and I know it's engineering 101, so I'm not that inept, but making sure that we have the backside not backflowing back into Town Park?
So of course, it's the model. So it goes back to the transportation. You know, this will be modeled. There's a master model. Basically, FEMA has a model of the whole area. I know I'm saying model a lot. It's a model. No, but FEMA has a model of the whole area. And what are the Gemini is the name of the company. They actually work with FEMA and for FEMA on occasion. They will modify that model to match what existing conditions are, because those models they're old. And so they'll go out there and verify every pipe, every ditch, every canal in the area to make sure that it is correct, and then update it, and then put our site into it. So it's the most accurate model that we could get, and then it'll model where that stage goes within that pond, basically. And we are not allowed to increase it. So the city, and I forgot one actually, the city, county, FEMA, and the Water Management District will all verify that elevation is not increased.
Okay, because it's the great concern. We
Sure.
add more space, but then ultimately it fills up and it drains the wrong way.
Sure.
And now it's in the back of the homes that we were trying to protect.
And we'll have to maintain all of those drainage patterns. So if those homes flow to that wetland, we will have to accept that flow into our ponds.
Okay.
So those will be maintained.
And I think that's where you're going with that, is how do we
Correct.
make it better
Yep. Yep.
for the people that are already there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, this is going to be a Mark question, so you get off the hook on this one. Dealing with parcel 2.
Don't go
Mhm.
far.
One of my great concerns of parcel 2 is, yes, y'all shrank down everything. You did more water management on it, and that's fantastic. But you got 10,000 square feet of commercial.
Mhm.
How do we go about making sure that the commercial is within normal daylight hours, let's say, from 7 to 10? That way we're not dealing with bike week behind somebody's
Sure.
house.
So like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is the.
Correct.
So you can commonly put hours of operation into a PD, and I think, here, if you wanted to add a restriction of some type on parcel 2, happy to do that.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's reasonable. The concept here, again, is neighborhood commercial. And so this is really, that parcel in particular, that 10,000 square feet, is really intended to provide an opportunity not only for our future residents on parcel 1, but for every other neighborhood to be able to have a place to walk and get coffee, or to grab a sandwich at lunch, or something for dinner, or something like that. We would be happy to incorporate hours of operation so that concern's addressed.
Yeah. Ultimately, you guys have taken parcel 3 and parcel 2 and really took the residents around the area that was already existing and,
Yes.
and allowed that to better, and hearing it from Chris also, is bettering the water management for their properties. So I'm happy to see that. I mean, when I first started reading it and 60% and then in open spaces turned into 76, nobody does that today. They're always trying to cut it down and get shorter corners and utilize every space possible. So staff is to be commended for doing that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You good? Reed,
Oh, man.
have we left anything for you?
Well, I mean, you got to go after me, so I feel really bad for you, Don. No, I literally, first thing I had written down was, what if it's a Chick-fil-A, 3,000 square feet? So I swear to you that is on my note right here. Now,
Drive through.
it's funny. First off, this is the most complex one of these. I've only gotten to do 2 of these, I believe, previously. So this is definitely more complex than the first 2. But just what question here that Tracy asked talks about, to me, why PUDs can be really good is because there are extra things you can put in there, like hours of operation, and you can negotiate this. Because whenever we have these things come before us, my concern is, what if it gets declined, where do we end up? You know, what ends up going in? We had a different project where if we didn't pass what was passed, then we were going to end up with a bunch of duplexes, and that was a complete mess that we would have ended up with. So I do think there's a lot to like about this project. My first question that I have actually is for Jessica about the categories. You talked about 40,000 square feet. They pick the highest. So if if restaurant's the highest, because your commercial is in 2 different lots, is it 40,000 for the whole project? They're saying, and I don't know what the highest is. I don't know if that's restaurant or whatever it is. Do they see that as 30,000 for the one and 10,000 for the other? Is it the same category either way?
So part of it will come down to, I will say, at this phase, what we have analyzed, the pre and post, is total 40,000 square feet at once. And
Okay.
I'll say, because it's restaurant without drive-through, that's probably not the highest generator. It's probably retail sales and service. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I read their reports a bunch. And the shopping center use that they capture that retail sales and service, it's separated into less than 30,000 square feet and over 30,000 square feet. And of
Okay.
course, the over 30,000 would have a higher generator than that less than. So when you're looking at the 40 overall, that's probably what they used. I'm going to asterisk that by saying, when we get into the site plan level of design, when we do the full TIA, the pod on the other side of Madeline would probably be its own site plan, right? That's its own kind of pocket commercial there. So they'd have their own analysis that would then use whatever is developed in that footprint for the very specific review.
Okay, because I will say, I think it's all of us have been trying to wrap our heads around the idea of how peak hour trips can go down. But I understand it, because actually where I live is walking distance to Salsa's and Publix and Rossi's. And I will tell you that multiple times a week, instead of driving my truck to Publix for a handful of groceries, I walk or ride my bike. And it's because I live so close to those things. So
Less person
But even
in
that
the
would-
way on the road
right,
to get
so
around.
there's your eye test, right? Because I live there and I experienced it, and even I can't wrap my head around it entirely. So
Yeah.
it's hard for me to understand, because another 1,300 trips obviously over the other thing. But I also understand most of that's probably just the fact you're talking about adding 40,000 square feet of commercial. So that's my only question as far as the traffic goes. I think most of the issues traffic-wise are not really in your control. We talked about Williamson and all the other things, so I don't really have a lot of traffic questions for you guys. My thing is flooding, obviously. I've been really concerned about water retention, and I've talked to a lot of residents. That seems to be the biggest concern, right? Because it's one thing to have to sit behind one extra car at a red light, is another thing to have water in your home. And so that's the thing that I want to ask. Can you, as I understand it, I want to make sure I understand this very confidently and short and sweet for the record. Whenever this project is done, will the properties combined hold more, the same, or, well, obviously you can't go less. So it's going to hold the exact same amount of water, or is it going to hold more water than it does today?
So let me do the simple answer, and the engineer can correct me if he needs to. I think from a legal standpoint, we can't hold anything less than what we currently hold. What we're anticipating, we have to go through the floodway study and everything else. What we're anticipating is we will ultimately hold more. And that's how this site plan has been put together. Specific.
Okay.
That's been a specific focus because of the concerns about flooding.
Right, because when we talk about 76% open space, as I interpret it, that's basically 24% of non-impervious you know, so
Correct.
that's your concrete, that's your sidewalks, your parking, your
buildings.
your buildings, right? But trees, grass, you know,
Yeah.
and retention ponds would all fall under that 76%. So I would like to, you know, that's my main thing is really concerned about the water.
Yeah.
You know, which I've already expressed this before, and so I just want to make sure I'm touching on that. And I also understand there's a possibility that 10,000 square feet could end up on Williamson, where you have 40,000 feet of commercial
Yes.
there, and basically nothing on parcel 2 except for retention.
That's a possibility.
Okay.
I mean, that could happen, and again, we'll know more about that as we go through that site plan process.
Well, I will say, and just for the record, and publicly advocating, from the residents I've talked to that are living in there, they seem to be much more, like, it seems like the favorability of this project overall becomes more and more to a positive side when they talk about that being all commercial being over on Williamson and keeping off of Madeline, and having even maybe more water retention, obviously more green space in that area, right?
Yeah.
Every resident that I've spoken to, that seems to be the key thing to them. So, you know, not that I'm here to try and force you or say that I'm not going to support this project because of that 10,000 feet being there, but the residents that I've spoke to have made it pretty clear that they would prefer it over on Williamson.
Yeah, and we certainly understand that. And I think, again, what we're trying to do is, you know, kind of follow the guide of your planning. At the end of the day, it may all end up over on the Williamson side, and that's very likely.
Well, I think common sense is a business person wants to be in the higher traffic area anyway,
Sure.
Right.
which is Williamson.
Right.
Absolutely. But main thing is just to make sure I want to make sure people who reach out know they're being heard. I want them to know that, you know, that's our job. We take all that in consideration as well as our own opinions.
Yep.
And so, you know, but I think you guys you've done something really unique here, and a lot of it impresses me. It really does. Obviously, I have my concerns, but at the same time, I think that the care that has gone into this and the approach has been really commendable.
Thank you.
And one thing that I do like too is that you continue to work at this as you've gotten feedback from us, from residents and the like. I walked backyards in Sunrise Oaks up against the B-19 canal after Ian, and it was scary. And not just leaving that area alone, but actually improving that area as far as stormwater retention means a lot to me for those residents there. Is we don't build anything, we don't get those improvements.
Right.
And frankly, if it were up to me, we'd be done. But that doesn't work. We keep having babies. We make sunshine. People want to move to Florida. And if we build more houses, then we also have sprawl, which is something that we're suffering from right now, particularly in some of our neighboring areas to the north and to the south of us. With housing exploding the way it is, we've reached a mature point in our development as a city. So instead of figuring out what we're doing to grow out, we have to figure out what to do and grow within. So I am very appreciative of the emphasis on stormwater. I also know that you say 74% open space. Some of our guideline cities around us have guidelines that are in the 30 to 50% range. And that's well in excess of some of the things our neighbors ask for. And I hope that this can be an example. And like I said before, I don't know if something's going to be built there, since we don't own it. Something's going to be built there. So how do we get the concessions? And how do we get the things we need that to address people that are already there? And I appreciate your responsiveness to that.
Sure.
Unless you have any other comments, I do want to open it up to the public right now. I
If I can
will
just
allow you
reserve
to
a
come
couple
back
minutes.
and respond to them.
Thank you.
I want to go through all of their comments, and I'm not going to call you up individually after each one. I want you to listen to everything so that you take in all their comments and that you can respond accordingly. So at this point, public participation is open, and if anybody would like to come up and speak to the item, now is the time. Come on, Robert. Okay. Tell you what, once y'all line up, you get 3 minutes each. So like the next person who wants to come up, be ready, come on in. You know how this works, I can tell. Love it.
Lisa,
Tell us who you are and where you live.
Right, Lisa Hutchinson, and I live in the Groves.
Mhm.
And I'm just I attended the meeting back in October, and I was here at the last meeting, whatever was January, wasn't it? We were here, and I'm just bringing again concerns from where I live, just some things for them to also ponder. I know we hear about, I know the B19 overflow, and I've lived in the Grove since '98. So for the first time, that was the first time, there was flooding on the street. Fortunately, it wasn't up into my, house or anything like that. But, the ponds came over Madeline as well. So I didn't know where we are as a city in terms of those ponds that are in the Groves area, they go up. And then, of course, across the street from me, people have the canal behind their houses and a colony in the wood, the poor people there. Yeah. That's the other thing. That I know it's everybody's thought. So I am appreciative of anything to help with that. So thank you. I don't know the answer to this, so I'm asking this, so maybe someone here can tell me. How do the apartments benefit the property value of homeowners that are in single-family dwellings? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe somebody could let me know that, because there's all these apartments going up, so I don't know. How's that benefiting me as my value of property for my home? That's something that maybe somebody could tell me later. The other thing, the commercial aspect, I really like the possibility, if you say you can keep it all over there on Williamson, but I think about that empty spot that's on the corner of Williamson that's been there and nothing's happening with it. That would be a concern for me for residents. If we have a small commercial lot on Madeline, and what if there's nothing going in? And then there's something there, but then maybe there's not. I know it's all in the future, but who wants to look at an empty commercial unit? I'm just saying. Nobody really enjoys seeing the one on the corner there right now. At least in my neighborhood, nobody cares to look at it. But I did want to also bring up about if they can elevate the property on section parcel 1. When you're elevating property, isn't that gonna create runoff, a certain amount more of runoff? I'm just asking. I don't know, but if they can elevate the property, then it's gotta run somewhere. And I just keep thinking about these people in Colony in the Wood, because, the Grove sits here and Colony in the Wood's down there. And so anything that, of course, can be done to continue with the plans. I really like the idea of creating more possibility for the water storage and that. But I'm just sharing my thoughts as a resident of the area. So thank you for listening, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Lisa. You bet.
Hey everyone, thanks to the council for a lot of great questions so far and concerns on these future plans. I'm Rob Pasternak on Halifax Drive, just outside the city limits of Port Orange, but I've lived in Port Orange most of my life, or real close. Like all of us, I saw firsthand a lot of the flooding, and that's most of my concern with a lot of new development going on here is, and glad to see that a lot of us are concerned with some of the water issues. Some of the things I was just at least concerned about is the B19 canal being maintained all the way. These guys are going to put, it sounded like, the same amount of output to that canal. We already know the thing backs up. I think really we should be improving things for sure before any kind of approval of this situation, just to make sure things aren't getting worse for existing residents, because I think that's a huge problem, is allowing this development to take place, even if it's smart development that's going to have negative impacts for existing residents. It might be nice to go there and walk and get a sandwich or whatever else, but if it causes your home to flood even more, or to flood where it didn't in the past, the 100-year storm, like we acknowledged, does not come every 100 years. And I just feel like these models and the engineers' plans, while they're good, they're not perfect. They rely on a lot of maintenance, both on the developer and the future owner of the property, as well as the city. For these things to work as they're modeled, the maintenance has to happen, the designs have to be right, all those calculations have to be right, and then it has to be built to the same specifications. And, I've seen another neighborhood there, Caracey off Town Park, and I believe that neighborhood caused additional flooding to my area where I'm at. And I just don't want to see something like that happen here. Looks like we're at least considering a lot of those things before the fact, which I think is great. I just want to say, additionally, I'm thinking I don't know how many more wood frame, most likely apartments that we need in Port Orange. There's already a lot of them here, I think there's concerns from living there, safety concerns, to longevity of the structure concern, but outside of that, I think it could be a lot of good things. We just got to plan it intelligently like we're doing. And thanks for allowing me my time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Have a great day.
Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive, Port Orange. This current thing has 900, I lost my place already, 873 residential units that are theoretically possible with the current zoning. And the developer is asking you to continue that 873 units, residential units, with this PUD. They're not even conceding the acreage that's going to be devoted to the commercial part. I think this is your opportunity to get a concession from them, reducing the number of units. When you look at the parcel 3, it's a long, narrow parcel. And it currently has ditches that run from the two developments, the Grove and the other one, that then drain into the B19 canal. And it looks strange when you look at the property like that. But then when you look at the north boundary of the property, you see the cutout for Yorktown Drive. And that would indicate to me that, and other things I've studied, that at the time that these developments were done on the other side of the B19, the county had an easement for bringing Yorktown through there. And that's why the long, narrow property is still available. Now that has since expired because they're not going to put Yorktown through. But it says that in 2006, there was a approval for 552 units on that property for a multifamily development called Villa Park that since then has also expired. So I think what it points to is that these units that are on that property, that are theoretically available for that property, just are not practical. It's not something that can be done because of the nature of the ground being so low compared to the other developments. And so I'm saying the developer should make a concession to you and the total number of units that they would be permitted to put on this property. And I'm not opposed to the elevation. I think that's good building up. But it might help to reduce the amount of land that is going to be filled, the amount of wetlands that's going to be destroyed to build properties, to build apartments. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Who else? Come on up.
Hi. My name's Yvonne Kiss. I am the HOA president for Sunrise Oaks. Yes, B19 is a grave concern for us. That's a topic of our monthly meetings. You and I've walked that. I've walked that with you. Talked to St. Johns County. They say that it's working by design. However, we all know it's not working by design. So with that in mind, I'm not opposed of this project. I think there's some really great ideas with it. However, that B19 is a huge concern for us. yes, I'm tired, I agree with you, I'm tired of hearing about the 100-year storm, but we did have 7 homes that flooded during that storm. There was another storm in September of 23 where we had 11 inches of rain. We also had homes flood during that time. So it's not necessarily just the 100-year storm. There is an issue with that B19. We have contacted attorneys, we've contacted the city. We're trying to see how we can get some rectifications for that B19. Working on that project for 2 years, but we haven't gotten anywhere because it seems that nobody wants to put the blame. St. County said it's the city says it's the county, so we've been in limbo with that. Maybe this project will help us get a correction for that problem that we're having. As far as 873 units, I agree. I don't think we need 873 units. I think the height, if we did half, maybe that height restriction would help. The photos with the drone of the balconies looking down at the other properties that are below them, the single-family homes. We don't have photos of single-family homes looking at 873 units, so I'd like to see what that view looks like. My other concern is parcel 3. Is parcel 3 wetlands or not wetlands? So I wanted to make sure, that was a question that I had, because if it's wetlands, it's not buildable, if that is true or not.
They're not building on it.
I know they're not building on it, but I think, isn't parcel 3 wetlands?
We'll ask.
Yeah.
We'll ask.
Okay. And then as far as the commercial, there's going to be restaurants and so forth. Is there going to be signs on I-95 directing traffic goers to those commercial restaurants that are going to be on Williamson? Because that's going to be an increase in traffic as well. So, I have a restaurant background. Other than that, I don't oppose the property, but I do have some concerns. You're welcome to our HOA meeting. You didn't come to ours, so I'll give you my card.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Kisses Cafe has a nice ring to it, by the way.
Doesn't it?
Hey. Who else? And who are you?
Hi, good evening. Chris Cunningham, 150 Sweet Gum. So my main concern is, by design, the same as the problem with the lights on Nova that haven't been fixed because it's city versus county, and we are in a position when we have that 100-year flood, we're in crisis, and we cannot have everybody arguing about who's going to take care of the crisis. Living over where I do, the crisis was flooding, the canals, one's the city, one's the county, nobody takes responsibility, and we are left with the issue. So is there some sort of guarantee while everybody's taking care of the canals, taking care of mitigating, taking care of how the water is going to flow, who's going to clean out the areas that aren't flowing? Who is literally going to be doing this when there is an issue? Who is going to be called? People that live in an apartment don't know who to call. They're going to call the apartment manager. Who is the manager going to call? People need to know what to do in an emergency, and we're having more and more of those. So we need assurances from all organizations, and I'm not opposed to this project. It's not that. I want people to be safe. I want to know. I didn't know who to call, and poor mayor. But it was we have crisis. People need to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and I think that's your responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Who else we got? Did we get everybody? Okay, here's what I want to do. Mark, Jessica, Chris, I'm going to allow you guys to respond to as much of this as possible, and whatever you miss when it comes back to council, believe me, we'll grill you for it.
Sounds good. Well, I will do my best to make sure that that we're touching on everything. Flooding. We've talked an awful lot about flooding, and I think that several of the speakers, talked about flooding. I think when you look at what we're proposing with regard to the overall development of the site. You know, if you look at the things that are permitted by right, so these are the traditional development patterns that you've followed in Port Orange. Historically, these are the things that are represented by the current zoning. Chris made the comment in one of our prior meetings, I think maybe at planning board, that it's rare you get a client that comes in and says, how would you do it? And the engineer says, I would do it this way. And the client does it that way, right? Says, I take every one of your recommendations and I move forward with them. In this case, our client came to us and said, came to the designers and said, how would you approach this? He said, well, I would take all the areas next to the B19 canal and I'd make them extra stormwater so that you're not creating future flooding concerns. You're providing a place for that extra stormwater to go. You're clustering the development on the one parcel next to the two connecting major roadways. And they said, okay, let's do that. And ACI came up with a great design for it, and that's what ultimately brought us here. So, you know, flooding has been, I think, from the very first moment we started looking at this, one of the primary issues we knew we needed to address. I think that has been, again, at the forefront of our discussions with your staff, and what we've incorporated with regard to the design of the project and the terms that are in your development agreement, including the requirement for us to do that floodway study. That deals with the construction of it, right? That deals with the design of it. From a maintenance standpoint, that is an ongoing question. You know, one of the benefits of the project internally is you have one entity that will maintain the systems there. You do have other HOAs that have responsibility for maintaining some of the systems around us, and you've got the county that's responsible for maintaining the B19 canal. One of the things we found with the county is every time we connect a new development to the B19 canal, like up by the airport where that big warehouse is going in, they said, great, connect right here, maintain everything that's within your boundaries. So maintenance now kind of shifts over and you've got that maintenance obligation. But I think one of the key things is it gets looked at during that process. And so, again, I think we've come at this from the standpoint of the flooding concerns and have very much focused on not just improving what's happening on this property, but how this benefits the region and the drainage basin in general by creating that extra capacity as well. Values with regard to property values. I think one of the things, you know, when you have a mixture of uses, you know, I think Strong Towns has done a lot of publication on the topic of, you know, where are those most valuable places in most communities, and consistently they come back and report that the most valuable places are the areas where you have higher density, mixed use kind of fabric. Downtowns represent our greatest value. Mixed use nodes represent our greatest values. And so, you know, I'm not a property appraiser. I can't tell you the percentages that the property is going to go up. What I can tell you from the standpoint of you know, our client's perspective is this is the first time they're going to be a developer themselves versus just selling the property off to somebody. And their focus is on making this the nicest development in Port Orange, the nicest multifamily development in Port Orange, because it's going to be something they own for a long time. I think when you are putting that kind of investment in an area, and you see those permit values and you see those land values going into the area, it raises values. I think you can look at the property appraiser's data and see that very consistently. Regarding a couple of the comments about, you know, kind of reducing the number of units and things of that nature, one of the benefits of being able to cluster, you know, again, we're taking on a lot of additional cost, additional infrastructure, you know, input and everything else as part of the proposal. It's one of the reasons why it's been very important to take those existing units and move them to one place versus saying, you know, we can do it with 600 units or we can do it with something like that. It's important because at the end of the day, to any development, it's a math equation. You know, can you make money doing this? That's a core, you know, core issue. And so that's why it's important to, you know, again, while we're clustering, keep the numbers the same, add the commercial in there, because it creates the value not just for the property and for the developer, for the community, but it does provide a return. And it provides a return as you're providing the additional stormwater benefits and everything else. So I think that's an important component of it. Last thing I'll mention, just you know, we've talked again about the commercial, you know, on Madeline. You know, when we came into this, we didn't have any restriction on that. We just said there's going to be 40,000 square feet of commercial within all of the properties, and we listened to your staff, and they said, you know, there's going to be concern about that being on the south side of Madeline. Can we put some restrictions in place? And so we limited it to 10,000 square feet. Happy to add the, you know, the hours of operation restrictions in as well. So if you wanted to make that part of the motion or add that to the motion, we'd be glad to have that in by second reading. One of the key things, Patrick Opalewski, when we first started, you know, working on this, when he was working with VCOR at that point, he kept talking about Rossi's Cafe. I haven't been to Rossi's.
Why?
I just haven't. I've eaten a lot of places because almost every
Chris will
time.
tell you it's good, isn't it?
Almost
See on the
every
list.
time I was in Port Orange before, I'd be at Persimmon Hollow before they closed. God rest their soul. But I've eaten a lot of places here, but I hadn't been to Rossi's. But that was the thing that, you know, Patrick consistently said. You need a little neighborhood spot on a lake like that. That's an important thing for a neighborhood, for a community. And so that's where that whole idea came from on the area south of, you know, Madeline. So I'd encourage you to keep it. Let us limit it. Let us put the hours of operation in it. Let us come back and, you know, we're going to see what those uses are as we, you know, kind of go through the site plan process. But, you know, I think that makes sense. You know, I was grateful. You know, we had a great meeting with your planning board. Ended up, I think, a 5-2 vote in favor of the project and a recommendation of approval. And I already read one of the things from your comprehensive plan, so I'm going to close with this, which is the other parts of this plan, because I think it follows along so closely with what we're talking about tonight. So I mentioned before, this is the policy that you put in place when you looked at your community and said, you know, 10, 12 years ago, we've got 20% left. How do we build out? How do we, you know, address moving forward? Objective 4.1, create a land use pattern that accommodates the diverse housing mix that meets the life cycle and socioeconomic needs of the city residents. 4.1.1, residential land uses shall be established in a variety of densities in order to create a wide range of housing choices and costs. 4.1.2, new neighborhoods should be created that have defined centers and edges, and the center within a quarter mile of the edge. Neighborhood centers shall include a central gathering space, place in the form of a park, civic lawn, neighborhood commercial node, or amenity. All the things that we have here. I already read 4.1.3 to you about clustering and sustainability and conservation subdivisions and all that. So I'll just touch on the last two. 4.1.4 says the city shall encourage residential land uses and developments which have a greater potential to support mass transit within designated public transportation corridors, with priority given to developments that will increase the, you know, transit ridership. Again, you're here at the corner of Main and Main, if you will. And this is an opportunity to do just that. And then finally, mitigate visual and physical impacts of multifamily development with architectural and landscape treatment standards. All of the standards that we've talked about tonight with regard to the setbacks and the buffering and all the things that we've approached from a site design standpoint. You know, it was interesting to go back and look at your comp plan and read how closely it follows along with what you said you need to plan for the remaining land in the city. So with that, happy to answer any other questions you might have. We appreciate all your time tonight. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much, because we sat at County Council this morning for 6 hours waiting for item 4 and 5 to come up, and we were item 11 here and got up very quickly. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any other questions.
The item seems to have come up very quickly, but
It did.
we're still here.
But we're still within the time we spent at County Council this morning. So
I won't get into that. Let's start.
You got 3.5 hours to go.
We're gonna no. We're gonna start this way. Read questions, comments to where we are right now.
Yeah,
We've covered an awful lot.
I'll give final thoughts, and then I'm also gonna. I do
Please.
have one more round of short questions. I never want to hear the words 100-year storm again in my life, because
500-year storm.
I don't even, or 500-year. You can call them 1% storms because that's what they are. There's a 1% chance of happening. I am so sick of hearing that phrase. I do want to address the Colony in the Woods thing, because I know that came up when we had Lisa come up and speak. Just something, and I did not know this. I learned this during the hurricane, but Colony in the Woods has private stormwater retention. So it was not something that the city had any control over, and so that's a very different project that's very much out of our control. But the other city neighborhoods that are in there, there are things we can try to have a say in and try to help. Not that we don't try to help everybody, but that's a little educational thing I did not know, and I learned it very recently. So it's good to have that. So the other thing that came up that I thought was pretty interesting was the privacy considerations. When it comes down the actual apartment part of this project, the apartments, is how many? Do we know how many buildings roughly it's going to be, or what we're aiming for?
We really don't yet,
Okay.
and I don't know what how many would come in a phase or anything of that nature either.
And then secondarily, are they all intended to be roughly the same size, or are
There's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you'll end up with a mix. If you look through the standards we have in the development agreement, we provide alternatives for the mix, so you can have the carriage house, you can have the townhome, you can have the 45-foot, a 65-foot building. So there's a number of different variations in there. Again, we've tried to put standards to make sure you're setting anything bigger back farther away from the roads.
Well, this whole process has given me a lot of confidence in you guys. So I'm gonna give you some direction or another set of opinions here, because of that privacy concern that's come up. Obviously, there's going to be a buffer, and I know you're going to be leaving a lot of things in place. But the way that this is laid out as far as the property, and I know it's turned kind of funny here on the screen right now, but when it particularly comes to the parts of this property that border residential areas are closest to the residentials that are existing, if you guys can try to keep that in mind when it comes to what height goes where. If your carriage houses can be closer to the homes as opposed to further away, and if your 6-story can be more towards the commercial, because I definitely would not want one of my neighbors with a 50-foot ladder looking out in the back of my house, my backyard, every single day I woke up. And I'm sure they all feel the same way. And I know that's being a little facetious, but nevertheless, just please consider that as this project moves along. It would mean a great deal to me, and I think it would mean a great deal to the residents.
We don't want a deer stand.
A deer stand? That's good. No, but that's it. Otherwise, I appreciate all the effort that's gone in on staff's part, Mark, on your team, and for all the residents who've put input in, whether it's being here or neighborhood meetings or emails or phone calls. Everything seems to turn out better when we all work together.
Good. Great. So, stemming off what he was talking about on height on the building, I know that when we talked about 65 foot, that is with the architectural design.
Right.
It's not where the person's going to be standing and going from his front door looking out. The question is depending on how many units you do at that 65-foot base, if you dropped it by one floor for just those few buildings, what does the impact do from the 873? What's it take it back to?
It really probably spreads it out more. I mean, within the footprint. I think this has never been intended to be at 6 stories. I think we've got a limit of 4.
4.
Yeah, so 4 is what our maximum would be on those taller buildings. And so I think when we actually said at the initial neighborhood meeting, we said 5.
5 stories.
And I actually got corrected because we never had intended 5. So 4 is what we would limit, and so I think we can accomplish what we're proposing to do with the clustering and everything else with a 4-story limit. That 65 feet is really more embellishment.
Okay.
So.
Good. Yep. Drew?
Further.
You still awake?
Yeah.
Can we poke him every now and then?
Yeah, please. What else you got?
Nothing.
All right. Scott?
Wayne, can you just weigh in real quick? I know you know the answer to it. So, who owns the B19 canal and who's responsible for it?
Volusia County is responsible for its maintenance. They may have individual private agreements for maintenance in certain other spots, but ultimately it is their canal to ensure that it's maintained.
Right. And I only asked the city manager to weigh into that because Chris Cunningham brings up a point that gets brought up a lot. I share the same concern. But it's a lot like trying to make your neighbor repair your roof, or force your neighbor to cut your grass, or force your neighbor. So it's people don't like it and they don't understand it, and I get frustrated with it too, but it's a very difficult situation for us to take responsibility of another government entity's part of their infrastructure. Same thing like the Dunlawton conversation we all hear all the time. It's not a city roadway. I can't force FDOT to do things on their roadway. And while I get that it's frustrating, it is something that we have to keep that into perspective and do what we can where we can, certainly. And so, yeah, the B19 canal is an issue. But there's no question. I mean, it's a concern. It's a concern on ours. Our staff, way before Ian, by the way, our staff's been, we look at projects all over the geographical boundaries of the city of Port Orange, and every single time these projects tie into other parts or components where we think we can maybe make some gains, but they're not all within our control. It's like the not to get too far off the topic, but the Nova Road Canal. You know, you look at what South Daytona did many, many years ago at Nova and Reed Canal. Well, that was great that it helped them, but it created a bigger problem for us. And a canal system we don't know. And we didn't have any decision over them doing that. So there's tons of challenges. We share your frustration. I hope you appreciate that and completely understand. We do. Just to comment on the colony in the
Doesn't
wood.
stop us from holding the county accountable.
Yeah.
Which we are.
Just to comment on the colony in the wood thing, in addition to what Councilman Foley said, is that's a community that was annexed into the city of Port Orange. It used to be county jurisdiction, unincorporated part of Volusia County. So while it's in their city limits now, and you're right, man, I'm talking about heartbreaking to see what happened in there, and has happened many times. It's a huge challenge for that HOA. Somebody mentioned HOAs and being responsible. I think it might have been Mr. Pasternak, but in regard, somebody mentioned HOAs being responsible to maintain their common areas and their retention areas, and they are privately owned by those HOAs, and we see that as a problem all over the city. If you watch our meetings, we talk about that frequently, where you see all of these retention ponds all over the city of Port Orange. If you ever look at an aerial view, the reality of it is very, very few of them are owned by the city of Port Orange. We have very little control over a lot of those retention ponds because they're private property. They belong to HOAs, they belong to county, they belong to state, they belong to whoever, but they're not ours, and so they're problems, and we do what we can, where we can, when we can, to try to improve those and encourage these HOAs to maintain their ability to retain their stormwaters, just like businesses as well. I can't stress enough some of the comments and echo even from some of the residents as well as the staff and the elected officials up here, what you guys have done with the project in keeping a lot of those goals and objectives in mind. You've really done a great job with that. I like a lot of the things that I see. I'm not so sure I'm there yet. And when you and I had a great conversation, and where my concerns and my frustrations are. I think the traffic infrastructure is a huge problem. I know we talk about Williamson being widened all the way to Madino and Belleville. Great. But that Williamson overpass, I am 100% convinced. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've been around here a long time, and I've seen what happens, and that is going to be a major problem. I know it's not your problem, but it is going to be a major problem with what is coming and what potentially can be developed north and south of that area. So that's a heavy, heavy concern. Adding commercial, not knowing what you know or don't know, you just don't know, right? And so, it's a hard thing. I'm really struggling. I know I probably feel like I'm just rambling here, but I'm really struggling in my mind. When we're looking at a PUD, a lot of times there's some give and take here, and I feel like, I could get there with this project, but I need to see some reduction in the residential units, to be honest with you, because I feel like, if we're going to put 40,000 square feet of commercial, that's a lot of commercial. That's a big piece of commercial. If we're going to put 40,000 square feet of commercial up, I'd really like to see 15% reduction in residential units. Something in addition to a lot of the positives you've already done. I don't want to go backwards because I think we're kind of getting there. So that's kind of where I'm at right there. The traffic thing is a major concern with me. Obviously, stormwater is a huge concern. I do like your plans with the stormwater thing. Somebody had asked, maybe you could touch on this. How do you keep water running off the property? Because that's the concern, right? Is if you can keep it all on your property, that's great.
Right.
But what we see in a lot of these storms, if it's an inch of rain, 2 inches of rain, what have you, it works out fine. But when we do get the 4, 5, 6 inches of storm of water over a 24, 36 hour period, you go all over the city and you see your water running onto their property, right? And that's not supposed to occur. And I know building codes and land development codes and stuff have changed over the years to try to stop that. But maybe you can speak to that, like, How would you explain that to the HOAs and the residents to say,
Sure.
here's how we know we're going to be able to keep our water on our property?
Yeah, so everything is going to be raised up, right? All new development gets raised. You know, this will probably be 4 feet higher, just because of the nature of where it's at. But we have to grade it to where everything drains internally. Now, there are going to be side slopes that go away from our property because we're not going to just put a wall around the whole property, right? But usually what happens is those will drain to the buffers, and then we can put little swales in there that'll collect those. So nothing, and especially with this scenario, you know, you look at the commercial node on parcel 2 is surrounded by stormwater. So even if once we raise it up, it's still going to just drain to the stormwater ponds. And then also with the parcel 1, with the wetlands internal, everything in there is going to drain. Just the side slopes are going to drain to the wetlands, and then we'll have drainage on the outside to collect anything that drains off site. We're not allowed to discharge anything more than what discharges now, and that is reviewed in detail by City of Port Orange, St. John's, and in this case the county as well. Oh, and I did want to mention that something that you alluded to, you know, City of Port Orange, you guys require now all stormwater easements on all stormwater. So in this scenario, you know, if for some reason something wasn't being taken care of, you know, the city has the authority to come in there and take care of it for us. So that's another great thing the city does. So just wanted to point that out.
You know, that's a great point. You know, you're one of the very few.
And bill you.
And bill you for it.
Yeah. I like holding a hammer.
You are, and I think I can say this. You know, I've worked in every city in this county and some of the surrounding counties and the county. I think you are the only city that does that. I think you are the only city that I've worked with that requires, as part of the development process, for us to give you the right to come in an emergency situation on newer developments, maintain the system in a way, you know, if it hasn't been maintained, and then bill us for it and lien the property if you don't do it. I mean, really should be done that way, you know, kind of across the board. It's a great approach. But, you know, you are the only one that does that. It's a great
Until
great
the
point.
state takes our ability away to do that,
We'll be
gonna do
quiet
that.
about it.
They
You
haven't,
know?
we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
And Mark, to your credit, one last comment, and I'll pass it on to the mayor, but you brought up a couple of times, you know, the city has a comprehensive land development plan, and we revisit that, and we talk about our vision and our objectives, and there has been this transition to vertical growth, and as, you know, leaving more land open, and creating more open spaces, which means you gotta go up if you can't go out.
Right.
And I get your point, and it's very well taken. I don't want you to think it's not.
Yeah.
But it also comes down sometimes to, you know, the city's a big area, you know, and you look at a certain project and you go, well, this will work here, but will it work there? You know, in case in point, you look at the developments across from the Pavilion Plaza now. We did a land zoning use change there, mostly driven by the residents who said, we don't want a Costco in our backyard or a major commercial development in our backyard. We'd rather have a nice gated apartment complex. We'd rather have nothing, but we know that's not a choice. But
Right.
you know, and so, and it worked, and it fit, and there was a lot of concessions and a lot of back and forth to make that stuff work. And now when you go out there today, well, again, we all miss the pastures with the cows rolling around out there and all that stuff. That has worked, and it does work in that area. So I just, you know, to your credit, I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's not lost on me. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Well, you know, and if I can just brief response to that, because I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
The day after we had our planning board meeting, I left. My son was turning 25. He's a college student again in Amsterdam. And, you know, one of the interesting things when we leave a community like ours that's by comparison extraordinarily young, right, compared to what you see there. One of the things that's interesting into your comment about, you know, the densities and the intensities that you're putting into this property. One of the amazing things there is that any place that I've ever visited him since he's been over there, I can walk within a 5 to 10 minutes of his apartment in a 3 or 4 story, 5-story building, for absolutely anything that I need. And you know, the policies that we talked about in your comprehensive plan really is designed to, I don't think any city in Florida is ever going to completely convert that way. But I think what we've looked at is in our last areas, in our major intersections, you really ought to do things like that, because you then can capture that future growth and put it in one place where you have the ability to walk almost anywhere for the things that you need. And so I know it's different, and it's hard to sit here and say, I'd love to say I'm going to throw you a we can do something with regard to density. It's also a much more expensive way to build and develop, particularly when you're putting all the infrastructure in, road infrastructure and stormwater. And so it's hard to say, I'd love to be able to say, yeah, we can do a reduction here or there. It's really, really, really a math equation. And we've done our best to try and make sure we're providing all the benefits that we can within the range of affordability of it. And so, I know with regard to traffic, it's absolutely one of the most frustrating things we hear at every hearing in this county. But I can tell you, and I'll give you one more example. There are plans that have been in place for 30 years between the county and the city of DeLand that are under construction now because cities, counties, and private development work together well to make sure the infrastructure is there to support the development. The Beersford extension is under construction now. That roundabout I mentioned earlier is under construction now. None of that would be there if we weren't having the conversations about how do we plan for these next things. And those are the conversations we're now having about Williamson and the overpass and the signals and the intersections. And they have to be solved before we can build.
Well, if you can make the math work, I'd love for you to be able to earn my
Absolutely.
vote. We're not there tonight.
Yeah.
But if you can make the math work with a 15% reduction in the residential thing,
Yeah.
that would be a big
Understood.
thing,
Thank
so.
you.
It's we're going to get into the bigger conversation as we move forward into the years. In 1976, we had 200 million people living in this country. Now we got close to 340 million, and somebody said by 2076, another 50 years, we're going to have 450 million people in this country, and they got to live somewhere. So the question is not just where they're going to live; it's going to be how they're going to live.
Iowa.
All for it. They need more sunshine there to bring
Wyoming.
it. But and let's face it, I live here in part because this is a great place to live, and it used to be a well-kept secret how good place Port Orange is to live and Florida is to live, and the secret is out to the tune of 1,200 people a day coming to Florida, and they don't all want to live in South Florida for some reason. I don't know what that is. But we're going to get into those conversations in the next decades about density versus sprawl, because sprawl threatens our wetlands. Sprawl threatens our watershed. And I would, more than anything, as much as I am a traffic guy and I don't like it, what we do with stormwater and how we protect our ability to treat water and provide clean water is essential. It takes priority, and I'm very proud that Port Orange, our consumptive use permit, which the state renews our consumptive use permits for water in 5 to 10 year increments, likes our water plan and what we do to the point where we got renewed for 20 years. Port Orange water is fine. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have an impact on our neighbors, and I'd like to continue to have a positive impact on our neighbors. Tracy, I do have a question for you since you mentioned it. Do you want to amend ordinance number 2024-03 to allow a commercial restriction of operating hours between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
That's your amendment?
That's my amendment.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
And just to be clear, that's on the parcel 2.
Parcel 2.
Okay, we'll make sure to make that.
On parcel 2, you are motioning to put a restriction on commercial from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have a second on the amendment? Comments on the amendment?
Good work, Tracy.
There being none, let's move back and move in order. First reading of ordinance number 2024-02, which is the large-scale comprehensive amendment. Call the roll.
Councilman Foley,
Yes.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner,
No.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 4-1. On the amendment to ordinance 2024-03, call the roll.
Councilman Foley,
Yes.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner,
No.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes. You don't think the amendment was a good idea? I'm going to poke at you.
I'd rather put it on the other side.
On the ordinance itself, first reading of ordinance number 2024-03, call the roll.
Councilman Foley,
Yes.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner,
No.
Mayor
Yes, 4-1. With that, tonight, I'm going to conclude this by saying, before I close the public hearing portion of the meeting, I'm going to just conclude by saying this is a beginning. Your work is just starting, and we're going to hold you to it. And our community development staff's going to hold you to it, because we're not just looking for quality, but we're looking for help for the neighborhood. And I appreciate your hard work with that. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The public hearing portion of our meeting is closed, and then with that, I'm going to take another 7-minute recess as nature calls. And we are back. We've concluded the public hearing portion of the meeting. Now additional items. Item 12, city attorney report.
None tonight.
Excellent report. Item 13, city manager report.
Nothing tonight.
Excellent report. City council committee reports. River to Sea TPO. Councilman Foley.
Nothing crazy to report except that we did not have a physical quorum at the last meeting, and so kind of made things interesting. But we have executive tomorrow, and we've been given direction to ratify all the opinions of the previous meeting. So that's all for that one.
Okay. With that, fire pension board.
Fire pension board meeting went great. The fund was up 3.4 million, 8.8%.
Really?
Yeah, and we did elect to keep the rate of return at 7.25, which means the city's contribution is not going to change in terms of that goes. The expected rate of return. Also, a conversation we've been having on the board was about doing an independent audit, and we've been discussing that back and forth quite a bit. We had Zach from James Moore make a presentation at the previous meeting, and then tossed around that idea, and kind of all of us warmed up to doing. Kind of put our toe in the water, so we'll be getting an official presentation. I trying to think what the right word here is, but official contract from James Moore to look at a aspect or two of the plan independently, and that'll be occurring at our next meeting.
Okay. Police pension board.
Police pension, just had our meeting on the 22nd, I believe, or 23rd. So the prior 12 months of the past year net, it's up 15.4%. The value on December 31st was $60,936,000. The fiscal year to date, the quarter is 7.93% net. So doing well there. And as of February 23rd, with the uptick because it's up more since the quarter closed, the plan went up $1.6 million from January to February 26th. So it's valued at $62,582,000, which is just shy of $1.6 million more than December 31st. So it's doing well.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, we'll go ahead and get all the pension boards. Scott, you said general pension board's already met?
Yep, we met yesterday. Something for council to keep in mind that's coming, and I think we kind of knew this was going to happen, but next year's contribution rate from the city is anticipated to increase pretty significantly from 15.4% up to 20.1%. And then the following year will be about a little over 23%. And that's largely being driven by raises that have been given to the general employees at a much higher rate than they were used for the actuarial calculation. So,
welcome to the times of inflation.
Yep. So that we'll have to deal with that. The plan's still over 80% funded, so it's doing well in that category. January wasn't a huge month, but it still was a positive gain of 0.33%, which puts us at 5.8% for the fiscal year into the positive. So hopefully we can keep that trend and meet our objectives there. And current market value of the plan sits at about $37.8 million.
Okay. First Step Shelter Board, we met last week. One of the first orders of business is that we had to elect a treasurer, a secretary, and a vice chair. Yours truly was dragooned into becoming the vice chair of the First Step Shelter Board. So I've got that on my plate as well, which is just fine because there's plenty of good news. The shelter, since opening of December of 19, has sheltered over 1,100 people. 599 residents in housing, and of those that we've got into housing after 2 years, 90% of them are still there. So a terrific success rate. Since the safe zone opened, 3,730 people have taken advantage of the safe zone, and we are one of the bigger participants. We've had 68 people there. Daytona Beach has the largest number by far, but we have after Daytona and the Volusia County, we have the second largest number of several participating cities. So the safe zone is something that we are taking advantage of, which is good because that helps us become Pottinger compliant, which leads me to just something I want to put out there. I would like us to consider, we're only contributing 35,000. We are using that safe zone. That was something that was not there when we put that 35,000 a year in place. And since we are getting more use out of the First Step Shelter when we get into budget season, even if it's just $10,000-$15,000, I'd certainly like to see more, but I think that we need to consider upping our consideration, contribution. We are one of the lowest contributing cities. Even some of the smaller cities are contributing more than us. And since we are getting more out of it than what we originally contracted for, that's a consideration. That's just something I want to put out there. I don't want anybody to comment on it because it's not something on the agenda, but I wanted that information out there so that when it does come up, that it's something we have to think about. General Employees Pension Board, we've already talked about that. With that, do we have any other business come before us this evening? None? You sure you want tonight to end? It's only been, we're just short of 3 hours. 3 more minutes, we could make it. With that, everybody have a good night, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.